Hey everybody, John Bell, and this is the Harbinger Report. Sorry to some of the fans. I started the show earlier, and it took me a long time to get everything together, which it always takes a long time because I got to take down everything piece by piece on the screen and reset up all the new stuff and try to organize it in a way that I can keep it somewhat together. It's it takes a while, and uh, and I had to grab a quick bite to eat too because I can't do it after the show. So limited time, but I try to do the best I can with it, the best that I can. Oop, trying to add myself back on stage here. Okay, there we go. Hi, crazy. Wouldn't be the show if it wasn't something crazy starting out. All right, so a lot of fans have asked me to talk about. I've mentioned before about how God had given me visions and prophecies, and a lot of people have reached out to me and sent messages asking me to talk about that. And I was going to do that last week per their requests, but then Sancho came up, said he was ready. I've been trying to get with him for a while, so I went ahead and moved things to go ahead and hit up the show with him, which turned out to be great. People really like that show. Sancho's an awesome guy, and he's always a fun guest. He's definitely a fan favorite. Okay, we're going to jump into some news. Well, I'm going to start off with some fun news and then get into real news, which real news is not fun news at all. And then I'm going to get into my story. And then I'm going to show my story should parallel some of the news. Okay. And I'll add a little bit to that. And then once I tell my story, I'm going to talk about this book. And if you haven't seen or heard of this book before, I highly suggest you get it. It's about a true story about a little boy in Africa, a young little boy. He was illiterate. He had no education, not one single day of education in his lifetime. But Jesus started appearing to this boy and started teaching him and telling him messages and asked him to go around Africa giving speeches on the messages that Jesus was telling him. And I'm going to cover some of that in this book. This boy was later murdered in the uprising in Rwanda during the massacre. He was murdered, and so were other children. Almost a million people or more were killed in that uprising, and this boy, God warned that that was coming, and also warned people that if they heeded the messages that this little boy was saying, that bloodshed could have been stopped. But because people didn't heed it, over a million people died. Now that's important because we're in a similar situation right now. And that's what I'm going to get into. But first, happy news. Okay, this is a picture of a giant squid. Notice the size of the people that are standing next to this thing. Okay, the long time they've argued, can giant squids be real? Can that be a real phenomenon? And yes, it is. There are recordings of squids that had tentacles that were like 100 feet long. This thing is absolutely massive. Um, so yes, giant squids are very real. Now they tend to stay in the deep, but we've got records of these things taking out whales. That's no small feat. There's also scars on whales from being attacked by these things, you know. So I just thought that was kind of cool. Wanted to throw it up there. This is Madman Markham from Art Bell back in the day, which, by the way, I listened to that show live. In fact, most of Art Bell's best shows, I heard them all live. Especially when I was working as a state trooper, I would listen to Art Bell because it was the only thing on the radio. We didn't have internet back then. You couldn't play like, audio books and all that kind of stuff. So I listened to Art Bell, and Art Bell got me through when I worked night shifts. Man, he got me through those shifts. And even when I was off sitting at home, I'd be bored and I'd start listening to Art Bell. And I listened to this guy when when Art Bell called him one night, Madman Markham, because this guy was crazy. I'm just bringing it up because since I just did an episode about time travel, all right, and that's what this guy was, Madman Markham. So that's why I wanted to bring it up. In fact, some other people, since I did that show, brought up Madman Markham. So I wanted to throw this up there. But Art Bell had read in a newspaper that some kid had gotten arrested for stealing these massive generators, like these generators you see at like they were portable generators, but still massive, massive generators like you'd see on truck beds and stuff. And this kid went and stole them. And what happened is he got in a fight with his neighbors, and his neighbors finally called the cops on him from that fight. And then when the cops showed up, they found all these generators in his backyard that had been stolen, and then they arrested the kid, you know. Um, and they were asking him, why in the world did you steal all these generators? It's not the kind of thing that, you know, normally people would bother to take or steal. And he said because he was working on a device to create time travel. All right. And of course, that got a good chuckle. Everyone laughs, ha ha ha. You know what I mean? But the crazy thing about that was that there were scientists that when he explained the physics he was doing and what he was doing, they said, "Hey, there's actually merit to this. There's actually merit. This is not as crazy as it sounds." And he said that he had created a small experiment and was able to open like a little vortex. All right. And he would throw things in that vortex, like screws and stuff at first. And he noticed they would come out like several hours later, even though they disappeared when he threw them in the thing. So he figured he needed to create a larger field and he needed more power. And that's why he stole the generators. And he started cranking the stuff up. Now, apparently, I believe some investors got a hold of the kid later and actually gave the kid a lab with the stuff he needed to test out his experiments further. And then this kid disappeared. And Art Bell was like, "Man, if you take off someday, you better let me know." And this kid just kind of disappeared, you know. Anyway, he I think he had like 1 maybe 2 years of engineering college experience, and that was it. But you know, listen to Elon Musk. He's like, you can take your degree and shove it. That doesn't mean that you're intelligent or that you know anything, you know. So that's something we're saying. Now, along those lines, I came across this video. Now, I'm gonna throw this out there. I don't know if this video, if I can find it, there it is. I don't know if it's real, valid. I can't say. It's easy to fake stuff today. But I'll tell you this too. Warning. Just because you see something today, don't always scoff that it's fake. Just because we live in a world where you have to be careful and question everything. Um, there is stuff out there that if you saw it, you would say it's fake, but it's not fake. You know what I'm saying? So you know, keep open mind. And this guy talks about we in my last show on time travel, we talked about John Titor or Titter, however you pronounce his name, as being like probably having a case for being one of the more genuine time travel people ever. And this guy mentions that, which I thought was interesting as well. So I just wanted to throw that up there. So let's do that.
I've been finally given permission to discuss the work that I do on a contractor basis with a government agency regarding the investigation, research, and development of what's called a temporal adjudicator. I'm putting some of the schematics up, and this is an incredibly rare and interesting picture of the portal that is created by the adjudicator. Basically, the adjudicator not only allows someone to move through time in actually a very limited sense. You can't go incredibly far into the future, and you can't go very, very far back either way, but you can go essentially a few years in either direction. They're allowing this to happen, especially on the social media platform, not on anything that is sort of mainstream in terms of media outlets, because, well, they really have a policy, whether it's UAPs and aliens or something like the temporal adjudicator, of telling the truth. And what they bank on, what they completely expect, is that it will be dismissed, ridiculed, marginalized, ignored, and they still then have the moral stance that they have told the truth, and you guys just didn't believe it. So that's why I'm not going to spend any time trying to convince anybody of its veracity. I'm just telling you about my experience. So here's me going through it. And what's interesting about it is not only can it go forward and backwards in time a few years, it can actually go anywhere in your current timeline in terms of location. So it basically eliminates the need for trains, planes, and automobiles. You can basically go to, this beach in the Maldives, anywhere you want to go. It's simply an adjustment on the adjudicator technology that allows you. I mean, that's actually how the technology first got developed, was trying to just simply create a technology that allowed essentially like a Star Trek beam me up Scotty, transferring someone from one place to another. It was then later found that through basically the synchronization of certain wavelengths on the adjudicator, that you could affect a movement away or beyond one's timeline or backwards. So this actually, though, in terms of this speech here, I think it's just a side interesting issue. I want to point out that this is a time that in the next 2 years, 2026, where the two suns, see how the sun's really weird lately in 2024 now? Well, guess what, people? That's just the beginning of what's going to happen with the sky, the sun, the stars, the space. Let's just put it that way. And two suns by 2026 is completely known, accepted, and not even a weird thing. The truth of it, there is, it's a better shot of it, although it's still overcast in this shot. I need to get a better shot, and I will. But this is an example of it. So just as a people that are going to say, hey, tell me about the lottery tickets or who wins the World Series or stuff like this, I can tell you this, that is something that people, they can't hide that for long, and they don't. This is actually, you should go back, if anyone wants to do a freeze frame on, this is in LA, this is a museum, and I'm going to actually let the thing play in a second at the end. But here's me putting in, for the 5100, and it's an old IBM legacy machine. John Titor has first mentioned this in terms of a time travel technology. And this is actually loosely based on the Titor model, but this is a bit different. But there I am creating a portal by just putting in the right circuit board into the 5100. Doesn't even need to be plugged in because it has what's called a latency charge. But this is, I'll show, I go through this, and this is another example of a little bit of a different portal than the first one that you saw. But nonetheless, this one is completely effective and basically shows the space-time distortion that's created. Now, once you go through the portal, everything sort of regulates, and you're able to see things in the normal sense. But if you look back, this is, the portal will remain for approximately an hour, sometimes even two, depending on the charge, the latency charge of the 5100 that you're using as your primary temporal adjudicator. But if you look around, it starts to collapse, and when you see collapse, you got to go. Here's a little funny little bit, though. You got to hear this.
I was assigned to record anomalies and find other wanderers not resetting correctly. Eventually, it was discovered that I was leaking my videos to the app TikTok. Although there was no way for admins to stop me, this was eventually put to an end with the ban of TikTok in the year 2025.
And I tell you why they want to ban TikTok. They want to ban TikTok because you can find the best information there. Hence, look where my videos are coming from. And a lot of material I just can't get access to on other channels anymore. So there's less censorship. Now, TikTok has its own censorship, and I'm going to show a guy who had something censored there tonight because I had a video I tried to put up, and it was removed. So, but I've got other videos that explain other situations. I'll explain that one to you that was removed and why, and go on from there. Let's see where we're going to next. So yeah, I just thought that was kind of cool and out there. I love time travel stuff. Now, I don't know that video is real, but I'll say this. I know that our government has the technology to do that. I also know that St. Augustine said time is only illusion. I know Einstein also said that time travel is absolutely possible. So, and as I've tried to point out before on my channels about space travel and stuff, time and space are interconnected for you physicists. So, if you can manipulate one, essentially you can manipulate the other with the right parameters, speed, power, etc. So, and we've used the example with Einstein's theory of relativity. If we had astronauts go in space and they had a device, a propulsion system that could travel near the speed of light, you can't, according to Einstein, you can't actually travel the speed of light, because what happens is when you do, mass increases and that slows you down because it now takes more power to speed up. So you add more power and to speed up, and then mass increases, and that slows you down. It's called the universe's speed limit, if you will. Now there's tricks around that. You can go just below the speed of light, and you've got wormholes and other technology of hyperspace and things like that where you can travel faster than light speed. All right. Now, but anyway, I'm digressing on that. I just love to nerd out on that stuff. Anyway, okay, moving on now to get into the sad stuff, which is real news. Not that that's not real news, but that's fun news. This is the not fun news. All right. But it's important, so we got to cover it. This man right here. Okay. I'll pull up his video.
So this November, the EPA is going to be voting on a bill to implement new water treatment programs into all local butcher shops all the way up to the big packers. Now these new water treatment programs are going to be costing up to $2.3 million just for all the new equipment, and an additional $500,000 to get them installed and regulated each year. This is an attack on our food system if you were trying to buy locally or from your local producers or from the local butcher shops. They simply do not have the money or the revenue to support this. So in a roundabout way, they're taking away your freedom and your right and our right to sell meat directly to the consumer. They're taking away our rights to buy what we want and consume and put in our bodies what we would like. They're forcing us into a box and forcing you guys to buy from the big packers that control 85% of the industry right now. I'm curious to see what y'all think about this. And as always, guys, buy American and buy local.
That's it. Buy American, buy local. I always say, and I absolutely believe, the backbone of our country is farmers and truckers. Without them, we wouldn't have any survivability in this country. And it used to be, we used to export most of our food because we made so much of it, we sold it to other countries. Well, the globalists have changed that to where we import a lot. And just like this farmer mentioned, most farms have been taken over by big business. And if you've learned anything on planet Earth since listening to this show or being alive, you better learn having big business is not good for you, your health, your children, or your future. All right. That's why the spirit of capitalism is having businesses on a competitive level, and that breeds invention and quality, because people are going to pay for what's quality. If those all monopolize into just a few companies, then you're going to see quality go down. And not only that, but tyranny go up, because they just say, oh, you don't have choice anymore. You just have to shut the hell up and do what we say. And that's never a good thing for people. Any way you cut it. Okay, breaking exclusive. Financial expert Max Kaiser warns global debt bubble has come to an end. So, of course, I'm referring to the Japanese stock crash. And why was that? They had to raise their interest rates, and because of inflation. Well, the U.S. is about one step behind that right now. In fact, the Fed was just talking about having to be forced to lower interest rates. The problem is that will devaluate our dollar. And when our government is handing out kabillions to any country who wants it, without any repercussions, that's a problem. That's a problem. So that means we're basically heading towards economic failure, economic crash. Now imagine what your life is going to be like when you can't pay your bills. Imagine what life's going to be like when you can't afford gas. Imagine what life's going to be like when you can't afford food. Oh, and especially when these companies are like, "Oh, you got to take our poison junk. Oh, well, that eat the bugs and not the beef." Really? Yeah, I'm sure that's what you're eating, Mr. Carl Schwab. You know. Uh, anyway, this is painting a very dark picture. The writing is on the wall, as they say. So make preparations now. The easiest way to buy some storable foods. By the way, I should do a show on that sometime. It's not going out and buying this survival storage food stuffs. Number one, that stuff is super expensive, and number two, it's not that healthy, and they're not giving you that much in that stuff. Now, there could be some exceptions, but it's not cheap. Um, the easiest and best way is go and buy some like 20, 50 pound bags of rice and beans. All right. Get a variety of beans. Darker beans have the most protein. So I would concentrate on darker beans, but get a variety so you're not eating the same thing all the time in an emergency, because that doesn't go well either. But if you get rice and beans in a 1-to-1 ratio, all right, it gives all the branch amino chains that you need to repair muscle in your body, which is why we eat protein. Okay. Beans alone won't do it. A meat source like chicken, beef, eggs, fish, that will do it. But when it comes to, I guess, vegetarian style, for lack of a better word, if you have rice and beans, you have to have both. And approximately, it's not perfect, but approximately a 1-to-1 ratio of rice and beans. That right there gives you is a replacement for basically if you can't get actual real meat. And real meat is very hard to store. It's not impossible, but it's super expensive if you try to just go buy it straight. Um, I could do a whole show just on that, and I'm going to be doing that on my bushcraft channel, Brave and Bushcraft. I'm gonna start pumping that out more because I got another camera for it, which is what I've been waiting on to start pumping out some shows in there. They're going to be shorter shows, but just informative stuff like on that. Now, also, since I brought that up and got on that gravy train, let me continue on a little bit. So rice and beans, it's super simple to go buy rice and beans. I recommend jasmine rice is my number one favorite choice for a number of reasons I won't go into right now, just for brevity. But rice and beans, go get some. Another thing is what's lacking in rice and beans, which is mostly magnesium and zinc, you can find in pumpkin seeds. And if you get roasted pumpkin seeds, add some sea salt, not table salt, not table salt. That's not real salt. You want sea salt or better. And when I say better, I'm talking like Celtic salt, Himalayan pink salt, that kind of stuff. And make sure it's authentic, because sometimes people label it as stuff that it's not. You gotta be careful. Anyway, that said, take a little bit of sea salt, which is real salt, and you put that in with some roasted pumpkin seeds. They taste like sunflower seeds when they're roasted. It tastes really good. And that it's like a super vitamin, a sunflower seed. I mean, pumpkin seed. It's like a super vitamin, and it's very high in zinc. It's really good in magnesium and has a whole host of other things. So it has like almost everything that the rice and beans are missing. So if you just went and got the rice and beans and stocked up on some pumpkin seeds, that's a good. It's not everything you need to be healthy, but that's one solid base to start with. Now, there's a whole bunch of other areas, but most important, keep in mind you have to have protein. Protein is one of the most important things to the human body, especially for men. 100%. It's the most important thing you can eat. So protein, very important. Women need it too, but you have to have that to repair muscle and damaged tissue in your body, those amino chains. Okay. So it's super, super important. But you have to have protein. You have to have carbs, obviously. Easiest way, like I said, rice. I'll get into more stuff like that in another show or in my bushcraft show on prepping. I'll try to do one of those pretty soon on that. I just did a whole video on there on where's my little joker, on having a long-term camp and hygiene kit. But I did the whole thing with my new camera and found out the sound button was off. So I did an entire show and found out I have no sound. So I've got to do the whole thing over. And man, that really chaps me. Did I talk about that already? Anyway, it still chaps me. I tell you, I was so mad. I was like throwing stuff. Because the thing is, I mean, I can redo the show, which I haven't even done yet. But I don't know if it'd be as good as that one. I was like, man, that was really, I did a great job. And I don't even think I could recreate that one. It was good. But anyway, I'll try my best. So protein, carbs, obviously. And easiest way to stock up on that is like, I already said rice, but how about flour, potatoes, that kind of stuff. Um, Salt, as I mentioned, the human body dies without salt. You want sea salt or better, not table salt. That's not real salt. It's not healthy. So sea salt or better, get it in like big gallon buckets. Get several of them. Also, one thing people overlook all the time are fats. You have to have fats, okay, to be healthy. And fats go rancid really quickly. It's very difficult to get shelf-stable fats. The best is the old school lard, which is just rendered pig fat, and then you got tau, which is rendered beef fat. All right, those, try to get organic sources, not just off the store-bought shelf stuff, if possible. In emergency, grab whatever you can, but if you can, try to get organic sources for those. They last a very long time. Ghee is another one. Ghee, certified butter. It lasts indefinitely for many, many years if it's sealed properly. And you don't need a refrigerator either for any of those. And then also coconut butter. It's fantastic. And then lastly, I would have things like some olive oil and avocado oil, that kind of stuff. Olive oil, avocado, they're fantastic. But I suggest you use those raw. Don't cook with them. The best things to cook with are organic butter, and I mean organic butter, or coconut butter. Those are the two best things to cook with. A lot of people say avocado oil is also good. Now, I just watched a show recently with a doctor explaining why it's better than most, but it's still not perfect for your health. And olive oil is fantastic, but never cook with olive oil. Never cook with olive oil. I learned that when I lived in Italy, by the way. So if any Italians get mad at me when I say that, I got two close Italian friends. Man, they jump me when I said that. They're like, we cook with it all the time. But I was taught that when I lived in Italy by the Italians in Italy. All right. Olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, is amazingly fantastic for the body. Raw. Always take it raw, like on salad or if you make a concoction, it's good just to just swig down some of that stuff daily. Like a little shot of it or something. It's healthy. And you know how we put like butter on noodles in Italy? They, instead of butter, they replace all that with extra virgin olive oil. But again, it's raw, and they're not heating it. So also, since I brought this up, one little quick thing that's a neat little hack. If you cook rice or potatoes or anything starchy, before you eat that, let it cool to room temperature. Even if you have to run it over cold water, or if you have to put it in the refrigerator for like 30 minutes, or if you just let it sit out for a little bit, let it go to room temperature. If you want, you can reheat it again if you want it hot. Room temperature is fine for potatoes and rice. But if you do that, it lowers the glycemic index to almost half of what it originally was. That's huge. That's gigantic and very healthy. So let your rice and potatoes cool to room temperature before you eat them. Anyway, that's just a few quick things on some survival basics for food prep. Okay. And like I said, if enough of you want, I can do a show on that sometime. I'm absolutely going to be doing a show on that on my bushcraft channel, my bushcraft channel. So, and I'll let you know about that. But anyway, moving on. Oh, one last thing, sprouts. Sprouts are amazing. You don't even have to have a garden. I would have seeds or heirloom only, not local store-bought seeds ever, but heirloom seeds, which are real seeds, not GMO. That means you can plant them, they grow more seeds, and you can grow more stocks. You can grow indefinitely as long as you take care of them. All right. You can't do that with local store-bought stuff. The big companies have already gotten rid of that. Doesn't work. I don't care if they got seeds or not. It's not going to work. Now, that said, so you always want heirloom seeds from trusted companies. And there's plenty. Go find them. Go stock up on some. But in a crisis, you're not going to be trying to grow a garden. You don't have time to do a harvest in a crisis. But what you can do is alfalfa sprouts. And not just alfalfa, but other types of sprouts. You can harvest those in like 2 weeks. You can do it inside. You don't even really need light. And man, those are nothing more than super vitamins and minerals. Boom. Don't even need to get vitamins from the store. Is it legal to say that? I'm not a doctor. These are for entertainment purposes only. I realize that we live in the time we're not allowed to speak truth anymore, without getting harassed or canceled. So I'm just throwing that out there. You do what you want. Okay, getting back to business, as they say, even though I don't get paid for this. Okay, you got the situation with the BRICS thing. Y'all have been hearing about that, right? They're saying the new BRICS currency is set to be equivalent to 55 US dollars. You know what that means? That means the US dollar is going to become worthless. That's what that means. All right.
The BRICS nations, or the BRICS trading bloc, are about to bring out their own asset-backed currency. And apparently, according to this video, if you go back and watch it, that's going to be, and it's going to be valued at 55 US dollars per one BRICS token or BRICS currency, whatever that's going to be. So let that sink in for a second. 55 US dollars for $1 of the BRICS currency to trade within that trading bloc. Now, have you considered, when this comes to pass, what that's going to do to the cost of imports for the United States? Where all of a sudden, instead of buying stuff overseas from a position of strength as the world's reserve currency, where, they would always get way more currency in a foreign country because they held the US dollar, which was quite strong. Now, that's being flipped on its head. So now they are importing from a position of weakness rather than strength, where, 1 US dollar is, 55 US dollars equals $1 of value within that BRICS sort of trading currency. So that means $55,000 would get like $1,000 worth of value within that trading. Do you understand what that's going to do to inflation that's already running rampant in the US? Now, I've told you in a previous video, the US dollar is going to go to zero because it's backed by nothing but debt. All it is going to take now, all the ducks have been lined up. There's enough nations now that are joining this BRICS sort of trading bloc. And all it's going to take now to crash the US dollar is for them to have, let's say, a little get-together, a little BRICS conference that they get together. All of them decide that they're going to drop the US dollar simultaneously and start to trade in their native currencies between one another within the trading bloc, and at the same time ditch all their US Treasury bonds in one go.
And that's the exact reason why they created BRICS, because they were tired of the US domination with the petrodollar as the world's currency. And that's why they created BRICS. So we're in trouble. Now, one last thing I wanted to say about the food thing I thought of while he was saying that. Those storable foods, go buy that stuff now. Why the dollar still has value and everyone's not realizing. You can't wait till there's a crisis to get prepared for one, because then there won't be anything left and the value of the dollar is going to drop. So you need to prepare now. not wait. Another thing, I would go get paper towels, paper plates, toilet paper, things like that. Stock up on that stuff now. And as far as meats too, because it's so difficult, get canned chicken, get sardines, tuna, get protein sources in cans. I would get canned meat before anything else as far as cans go. I'm not a fan of canned food. A lot of them are lined with BPA, which is not healthy. It's an estrogen mimicker that is not good for your body and health. But if you're in a crisis that all you got left is canned meat, well, chug on, because you're not getting food anywhere else at that point. You know what I'm saying? And I would save those cans for protein. Not I wouldn't waste it on vegetables. I would maybe do some comfort food, like some fruit, just or maybe canned pudding. But anyway, you get the idea. Get most of it in meat, and forget cans of soup and crap like that. That's not giving you any nutrition. What's wrong with you people? Okay, back to what he was saying. This is bad. This is real bad. Okay, so as he brought up, they created BRICS to destroy the US dollar and remove it from being the world currency. And if they do that, we are done. And he also pointed out the US dollar is what's called fiat currency. Fiat currency means it literally is nothing more than paper. That's it. It's just paper. Our dollar is not backed in anything. Now, back in the day, the US dollar used to be backed in gold, and then it was actually worth something. But it isn't that anymore. It's not backed up by anything. That's why they keep raising why do you think they're spending so much money, other than the fact that they're intentionally trying to bankrupt us on purpose, which they are trying to do? But why do you think they're spending so much money? They know the bubble's getting ready to bust and it's all going to go away. So they're trying to spend that money now. They're getting kickbacks, and they use that money to go buy real assets like land and gold and crypto and things like that while they can with that money, so that they can transition into the new system and still have assets, because land is always an asset, so this is hugely important. All right. They're backing up the BRICS currency in real, tangible, physical assets, so that their money isn't paper money. It's not fiat money like our trash. I mean, dollars, same thing. Because soon the US dollar is going to be good for nothing except maybe keeping you warm at night when you're burning it in the fireplace. That's it. Millions just crisping away because it's worth zero. So that's coming. Now, another point to this, I listened to a top economist the other day who was saying that when countries get to the level of debt that we are in, what was it, like 36 trillion now? When companies get to the point of debt that they can't pay back, the solution of that country is they start a war. No. When countries can't pay their debt, they start wars. They go to war. It's done for 4,000 years. All right? You just got to study a thing called history. All right? History repeats itself. That's true. When things like this happen, anytime something threatens the United States as being the world currency, we go to war. Every time we go to war, we go to war, we go to war. So where are we going? Where's this train driving? To war. To war. What's going to happen to our economy? It's going to go to trash. The writing is on the wall. So take appropriate measures. I suggest everybody quit your job, pack your crap, and get to a rural area in the wilderness, because that is the safest place you can be right now. Wherever there's the most resources and the least amount of people is the safest place you can be. All top experts agree. The biggest threat in any major crisis is other people, because they'll start killing each other over resources. So you don't want to be in a city when that happens, or you will be unalived, and so will your whole family. And I hate to put it that way, but I'm trying to give you truth. And the prophecies God gave me, it's all about this stuff. That's why I'm talking about it. That's why I'm talking about it. Okay, up next. This man, this is the man, this video was actually taken down, but I'll explain about that after I play two other ones.
What's up, America? This is now the second story today that I've come across about this BS. Check this out. Robbery homicide detectives have issued a warrant for the arrest of a 56-year-old homeowner after he shot and unalived an intruder who broke into his home inside a gated community in Buckingham Estates in Corpus Christi, Texas. The dude broke into his home. He protected himself and his property from imminent danger. And check this out. For the second time today, he is now the one facing charges. This is insane that the American citizens are being charged for protecting their life and their home and their property and others. If someone breaks into your home and you do something to them, this administration is making you pay the price for that. Not the person that broke into your home, whether you do whatever to them or not. You're the one that is getting charged with this. This is insane that we are allowing our government to come in and arrest good, law-abiding citizens because they're protecting themselves.
And their families. But it's not insanity at all. I mean, to normal people like us, it's insane. But you got to understand something. As I've said before on here many times, we live in a new communist system. If you think we live in freedom in America, you are wrong. You are wrong. We're living under a new tyranny, communist, neo, there's some fancy words for it, technocratic, blah, blah, blah. We're living in a communist system. Ultimately, these are globalists, which means they believe in globalism. They believe in creating a one world government. They believe that they have to destroy the US in order to create that one world government. The US is the last bastion and symbol of freedom, of independence. They can't have that in their new system where everyone is a slave. All right. So they have to destroy the US, our own government. Our globalists. Globalists have taken over our country. And these globalists are pushing communism. Why? Because communism, again, history, trying to make an H here, history proves communism is a perfect tool to destroy countries and governments from within. Look at the French Revolution. Look at the Bolshevik Revolution. Both communist takeovers of those countries. And look at all the pain that's come out of that sense. And now America, that's what's happening to America from the top, from inside. It used to be that the United States was extremely anti-communist. We used to have panels that, oh, are you suspected communist? They come question you. Now the communists got in and took over. Now, being a Christian, a conservative, a patriot, that's now the new threat according to our government. All right. That's communism. If you look at other countries like England, like Canada, the same thing is happening in those countries. In communism, you do not have a right to defend yourself. If you defend yourself or your family, you are going to be the one who goes to jail. All right. Welcome to communism. That's what it is. That's why it's bad. That's why we don't want it. So, but that's the system that they're using right now.
America, this is getting absolutely insane. For the third time in the amount of days, Indiana homeowner shoots and unalives alleged burglar. Aaron Snyder, 41, alleged broke into the home Sunday night. Homeowner saw Snyder and shot him. Snyder was unalived at the scene. This is what I'm saying. The case will be presented to the prosecutor's office to determine if the homeowner has any charges. No, they're charging you. Do you see this? This is the third time now. You cannot defend yourself without catching charges. This is insane. For the third time in a row, if someone has broken into their home and they have pew-pewed them because they were in threat of their life and their property, they used adequate force to neutralize the issue, and now they are being charged. We are being charged with this. They are allowing these people to do what they want, to come into their homes, to do what they want to us. And if we try to fight back, we're the ones catching charges. If our government doesn't stand up immediately and put a stop to this, there is not going to be any holding back on this, because they are absolutely going after the homeowners for standing up for themselves and their properties.
Yeah, that's the truth. That's the truth. Now, I'm going to swing back to this video he did. This is the video that was removed. Remember, he said 2, and then I can't find my hands. 2, and then that was the third one. Well, this is the first one. All right. And I'll explain what happened in this one. TikTok took this video down. Why? I don't know. But it was an important story. I'm sorry I didn't get up fast enough, and they removed it. But I'll explain it to you. He tells the story that in England, all right, in England now, these other two were in the U.S. examples. This one's in England. A man was having a birthday party for his 4-year-old daughter in the backyard of their home. A Muslim immigrant hopped the fence into their backyard carrying a assault rifle. Oh, wait a minute, John. England, assault rifles are illegal. How could this man obtain an assault rifle? Well, that's easy to explain, because under communism, when you remove the Second Amendment, even though it's England and they don't have the Second Amendment, when you remove the right for citizens to be able to defend themselves with guns, nobody informed criminals that was the rule, because criminals still will always have access to guns. So when you remove guns from the citizens, all you're doing is turning the citizens into little piggies, little victims waiting to go to slaughter. That's all you're doing. That's all it is, because criminals will always have access to guns. Okay, so moving on. The father sees what's going on when this Muslim immigrant, and that might be why they took it down, because they said Muslim. You can't say Muslim did something wrong, even though they're causing all the crime from all these immigrants they're bringing in. But anyway, the father tackles this guy. He's able to wrestle the assault thingy jobber away from him, and he's able to punch the guy and subdue him and hold him for the police to get there. Well, guess what? That's where the story gets more interesting. So the police show up, and who do they take the guy to jail, but you know who else they decide to charge? They charged the homeowner father with charges of assault for punching the man who just tried to unalive his entire family. So this man is getting punished for trying to defend his family. He didn't even use a weapon. He didn't even unalive the bad guy. And still, he gets charged for trying to defend his family. Dude, when we get to a point that humans have gotten so stupid that you can't defend yourself or your children from someone trying to kill them? No, no. You can kiss my butt on that one, my shiny butt, because you can kiss my ass on that. I'm out. Yeah, like, I won't put up with that. That's not a country I want to live in or be a part of in any way, or government. Y'all can kiss my ass on that one. I'm you've gone too far, too far. So I mean, I don't even have words for that kind of thing, but that's what's going on. That's what I'm saying. It's not just in the US. You're seeing this in other countries. Other countries are ahead of us. Now, guess what else they did with this guy? After all that, the bad guy, they let him go. They let him go. Now that might seem crazy, but it's not. You know why it's not crazy? Because the whole point of that was the globalists are allowing the criminals to act and cause chaos, and they're punishing the citizens. That's what it's all for. So they let the criminal go. Oh, one more important point to the story. They asked this man, why did you try to kill this family, this innocent family who he didn't know and had done nothing to him? And this was his response. He says, because the price for me to be able to leave my country and come to this land of opportunity, if you will, even though it's England, was that he was told by his religious leaders that he and others had to do this as the price for them to be able to leave their country to come here for a better life. We are in a war, ladies and gentlemen. We are in a war. Let's see. I'm going to continue on from that point.
You guys seem to be really into the not important and not suspicious news, so let me give you some more. Let's talk about this dude. If you're unaware of who this is, his name is Asif Raza Merchant. He is a Pakistani national, and he recently wanted to visit the US. Now, he didn't fly directly from Pakistan. No, first he went to our good old friends in Tehran. He flew from Pakistan to Iran, spent 4 days there, then flew directly from Tehran to Houston. Now, when he got to Houston, he ran into some trouble because Asif here is on the terrorist watch list. So you can imagine when he showed up, there were some issues. Luckily, Asif is a very good talker. I mean, he'd have to be, because even though he was on the terrorist watch list and was interviewed by the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force, they decided, no big deal, and gave him special permission to enter the US. They actually gave him what's known as special public benefit parole, which is a privilege reserved for people whose visits are so beneficial to the American people that their history doesn't matter. Whatever he said he was doing here must have been fucking spectacular, or at least the FBI thought so. So even though Asif was on the terrorist watch list, they let him in and gave him special parole. Although that didn't work out too well, because yesterday Asif was arrested. Now, what do you think he was arrested for? Go ahead and pause the video and put it in the comments. Asif was arrested for...
I just paused it because he said so. But man, that was dumb. It'll probably
You guys
start
seem to be really into the not important and not suspicious news, so let me give you some more. Let's talk about this dude. If you're unaware of who this is, his name is Asif Raza Merchant. He is a Pakistani national, and he recently wanted to visit the US. Now, he didn't fly directly from Pakistan. No, first he went to our good old friends in Tehran. He flew from Pakistan to Iran, spent 4 days there, then flew directly from Tehran to Houston. Now, when he got to Houston, he ran into some trouble because Asif here is on the terrorist watch list. So you can imagine when he showed up, there were some issues. Luckily, Asif is a very good talker. I mean, he'd have to be, because even though he was on the terrorist watch list and was interviewed by the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force, they decided, no big deal, and gave him special permission to enter the US. They actually gave him what's known as special public benefit parole, which is a privilege reserved for people whose visits are so beneficial to the American people that their history doesn't matter. Whatever he said he was doing here must have been fucking spectacular. Or at least the FBI thought so. So even though Asif was on the terrorist watch list, they let him in and gave him special parole. Although that didn't work out too well, because yesterday Asif was arrested. Now, what do you think he was arrested for? Go ahead and pause the video and put it in the comments. Asif was arrested for plotting with Iran to assassinate Donald Trump and 35 other government officials. Who could have seen that coming? Who could have guessed? A Pakistani national who is on the terrorist watch list flies from Pakistan to Tehran, Iran, spends 4 days there, and then flies directly to the US, where he is picked up, fingerprinted, and released, even though he's on the fucking terrorist watch list. Yeah, that ain't suspicious.
Yeah, so the reason I played those two stories together, and sorry, I was goofing off and ended up starting it all over again, but the reason I played those two stories is to show the same pattern. See, like in law enforcement, everything is pattern recognition. You follow patterns, you look at patterns. Same thing in intelligence, you're looking for patterns, all right? So that said, I played those two back to back because you can see the pattern, okay? See the pattern and watch the pattern get worse.
New Yorkers say they're shocked after seeing Muslim patrol cars roaming their neighborhoods like police squads. These Muslim community patrols just began operating in Brooklyn this year, with members dressed like police officers and driving cars identical.
So now you got Muslim communities that are acting like they're police when they're not. But don't tell them that, and don't tell the people they mess with. And what do the police departments do? They're too scared to do anything, so they back off. All right. So, what is this one? No. I think this is the next one. Check this out.
Dabu7 here, checking back in with you. And I'd say that it's just about game time here. I suggest that people take this stuff serious. We've talked about what could potentially happen here for a lot of years, but it looks like some critical stuff's going down. If you don't know, we have an incident that just took place outside of Fort Liberty, former Fort Bragg in North Carolina, where we have 2 illegal migrants that were spying on a special forces colonel, snapping photos of his family and his kids, and he caught them. There was a confrontation. He shot and killed one of them. And this is a big deal because other colonels, other people are going on like Fox News, and they're saying that this is a huge threat. They're in here, they're spying on our top level generals at their homes here in this country. And now they've been engaged. They go on to say that here in this country, these illegal migrants are showing up at our military facilities 2 to 3 times a week. A week. That brazen. Well, everyone's just ignoring it, right? 2 or 3 times a week they're showing up at our military bases and they're getting turned away. Now, the ones that are showing up at the bases are showing up acting like they're trying to document for some kind of whatever excuse they give. They do have passports, the ones that show up there, and they seem to be the forward unit of this invasion. Of course, we know there's millions in here at this point. They are also stating that they are rolling up on our bases with drones 2 to 3 times a week. Incursions. So our bases are getting infiltrated by drones, and these dudes are rolling up on them in packs. And they're rolling up on our colonels at their homes, spying on them. Hello? How much more are people waiting for? What are you waiting for? Them to show up at your house? Taking pictures? Like, dude, you better get ready. You better get it all ready, locked and loaded, everything that you got. You better get with your neighbors. You better get plans together. They're here. Enemies here. It's because we've been sold out. They brought them here. So you better get the training. You better be taking your extra time, your extra money. You better get ready. This ain't no joke. They're here. Just like they rolled in the Trojan horse. And at night, they sprung. It's like they're waiting for their moment And once it begins, there ain't no going back. This country will never be the same. You better get ready. I'm warning you. I'm warning you, I'm warning you, I'm warning you. It's that time. So, y'all better be prepping, full scale. You better be training. You better be training. You better be getting with your people. You better be doing everything it takes right now while you got the time. Before time's up. We got a big event coming. And as soon as a series of events goes into motion, it's like dominoes, one after another. And it won't stop. So, a heads up here. I'm going to leave some links below. Make sure to check out the video clip on my Twitter as well. You can hear it from the Colonel's mouth talking, or the Admiral on their Navy Admiral, talking about what's going on.
All right, that is huge. That is gigantic. Okay. So when we're at a point that we have an invasionary force that's being this brazen and tracking colonels and officers and special forces and finding out where they are, where their families are, this is really bad. That's a bad sign. Bad sign. Now, here's the problem. The problem is, with the excuse of the open borders, the globalists, in conjunction with the UN globalists, I always talk about the satanic UN's replacement migration, which I call, and go look that up, UN's page replacement migration, which I call weaponized replacement migration. And you can find things like Canada, where there's parts of Canada where there's no Canadians left because they've been pushed out by the migrants. All right. And see how they were treated. I got a friend, I can tell you, he wasn't treated very well by the migrants there until finally he was pushed out too. All right. But they've used the open borders as excuse to basically bring a standing army into the United States that are going to be turned against us, against our people, against our children. These people are not Americans. They hate Americans. So you're going to have a major crisis, and then the government's going to declare martial law. Next thing you know, UN vehicles are going to come rolling up. And yeah, they've brought in all the UN vehicles already. I've shown them on previous shows. They've got UN vehicles. They got UN tanks. And they're going to give weapons to all of these people. These aren't just illegals. They brought in an army, a UN army here that's going to be rounding up dissidents and taking them to re-education camps. This is real. And when they're at the point that they're tracking U.S. brass, like colonels and special forces, and they're doing it that often, that means they're in their final stages to set off the attack. That means our time is about this much. Wait, about that much. The communist globalist leaders we have in power now, working with globalist UN, have used the open borders as a justification to bring in a whole army of UN soldiers. They have also brought in weapons for them. They have brought in vehicles and tanks. Now Biden and leaders of Congress are openly declaring a civil war if Trump wins. And probably even if he doesn't. They'll still say, oh, we got riots. It's now a civil war. They have been building concentration camps in the U.S. since 9/11 under REX 84. Look it up through Halliburton. They built 800 re-education camps in the United States. Media, I've listened to media reporters that have called for putting Trump supporters in re-education camps, or conservatives, or religious people, or even just white people. And yet they call us racist. Here's a scenario how it could go down. A major false flag events will take place. And I mean false flag events, meaning we created and orchestrated it. Causing fear and panic. The government will claim there are major riots. And at one point, they'll declare civil war. Funny how Obama put out a funded movie called Civil War, right? Yeah, I'm sure that's just a coincidence. They will force martial law, lockdowns, aided by UN military forces, not our own people, people who hate us. Travel will be stopped. Travel will be regulated and restricted. There will be checkpoints. All conservatives, Christians, will be taken to re-education centers, forced labor camps that you will never leave. And don't get me started on what conditions are going to be like in those camps. Anyone found at any checkpoint not vaccinated, they have technology that can scan you to know if you've been vaccinated or not. They've got technology that can scan that. So whatever you feel on vaccinations, pro or con, that's not my point. My point is they have methods to scan you, and my point is, self-freedom, self-decision is going out the window with all this. Okay. The only way and another reason I bring up the scanners is don't lie. Don't lie and try to say, oh, have fake paperwork, because they know better. It's not worth lying, because they'll charge you for lying. And that's already taken place at some airports, by the way, just in case you didn't know. It's been reported in the news. So so there is technology that it's like a light scan. So don't lie, don't make fake paperwork. It's not worth it. They know. So it's not worth lying. The only way to survive this is to get ahead of it. Remember, you can't prepare for a crisis in a crisis. By getting out before it all starts, getting out to the most rural areas, most rural states. All right. You want to go where there's the least amount of people and the highest number of resources. They will be too busy trying to control everything in the cities than to try to deal with every single person. So that's my warning that I put out there.
Folks, this is a very dangerous time in our country right now. We have these Venezuelan gangs that have come into the United States that have gone through the border, that either were detected or undetected, but they were let in. They are now taking over blocks in the United States. We broke the story a couple of weeks ago. There's an apartment complex in Aurora, Colorado. We had a gentleman come on as the owner. They have taken over 2 of his apartment buildings. They've harassed the residents. When people move in, they get illegals. That when people move out, they move in illegals. They just break into the apartment, move them in, and they collect the rent. They have threatened the owner. The owner has gone to multiple authorities. He went to the cops. They said they could do nothing. They were squatters. They're actually collecting the rent in empty apartments. They threatened the guy and said, if you keep harassing us, we're going to kill you and your family. The FBI, they went to them, they did nothing. DHS, they went to them, they did nothing. They go to every security apparatus. They said, oh, you got to go to a legal case. They're now squatters. I mean, this is what's going on in the United States. These gangs are popping up all over the place. They're being led in the country. They're taking over blocks. They walk around the apartment building with machine guns hanging on their breath. This is a military-occupied territory in the United States, but Colorado's a sanctuary state. Denver's a sanctuary city. The mayor there does nothing. The politicians do nothing. And meantime, residents are harassed and they got to move out. And so this is happening all over the country. This is part of the Harris, Walz, Obama, Biden plan. Let as many people come in the country as they want, take it over, destroy it from within, and then basically they're going to have power in perpetuity. And we're doing nothing about it. When you go to the authorities and you're basically told they've taken over your apartment buildings, they're threatening you to kill you and your family, and they can do nothing about it. Where the hell is this thing going?
I heard one story that this happened to a guy who bought a new house, and some squatters took it over. And under law, there wasn't much he could do to get these people out of his house. So he tried to go to the authorities. He tried to do the right stuff. He tried to show that he had he owned the place. And under the laws, they don't care. They give more rights to the squatters than they give to the owner, which that's insanity, right? So it's not a sanity, it's agenda. And this agenda, it's just like the farmers back in the day were like, I don't think the government understands the problem on this here border. They understand the problem. What you don't understand is the agenda. The agenda is for them, not you. All right. But anyway, this guy finally, the solution he came up with to resolve this was he went to a biker gang. He hired a biker gang to go in there and kick out the illegals, and that's what they did. Thank God for the bikers. They went in there and got the job done that our own dang cops couldn't do. Imagine that. Imagine that. What happened to law in our country? Well, we have come to the time of lawlessness. And the Bible says when you come to the time of lawlessness, you come to the time of the lawless one. And the time of the lawless one is the Antichrist. And that is where we're at. And that's going to segue into the second part of the show, where I'm going to talk about my story, my personal story on some of my prophecies and everything. And then the third part of the show, we'll be talking about my brother here. I always struggle with his name, Sagatasha. All right. And I hope I'm not destroying that, but Sagatasha, and talk about his story because his overlaps mine a little bit. And I think his story, it's worth people knowing more about. I don't know how many people are aware of it, so I think it's really important. So anyway, there's a few little more news articles I just wanted to bring up real quick, and then I'll go into my story. All right, here's one. Bill Hates funded research into genetically engineered cattle ticks. Now, 450,000 Americans have red meat allergies because of tick bites. I'm sure that's just a coincidence and not designed on purpose. I can't read this. It's too small. Doggone it. Wait, let me see if I can make my screen bigger. Yeah, it's better. Hi, I'm Phil Marshall, a former airline captain and author of a book that exposed the official 9/11 narrative as a lie. And the reason I'm throwing this up is because I just did a show on 9/11 was a total lie. Weeks after my book was released, I was found dead with a gunshot wounds to my head, along with 2 teenage kids and our family dog in our California home. Imagine that. Imagine that. Man, I tell you, we live in some evil, evil times. But y'all know what the solution is. This is the solution right here. Yes. Okay. Moving on to the next one. This small print, basically what this is about is there's a bill where they're going to vote on whether they should tell you if they're putting human meat in your food or not. Human meat in your food. Should we tell the public? The corporations don't want to tell you they're putting human meat in their food and serving it to you. Evil. No right to free speech if government deems misinformation or hate speech. Well, that just means anything they disagree with is misinformation or hate speech, especially if it involves weaponized replacement migration. You know what they did in Canada so that the immigrants could kick out all the Canadians? They made a law that if you offend the immigrants, you go to jail. So no one talks to the immigrants other than, hi, how are you? Have a good day. How's it going? Are you enjoying taking over my country? Joe Biden not confident in peaceful transfer of power in 2025 if Trump loses. He goes on to say there will be civil war. Roger Stone speaks on Representative calling for civil war. This representative, Representative Raskin, boy, that just sounds like an evil name, announces plan to deny Trump's presidency using 14th Amendment. Prepare for civil war conditions. But hey, why don't we hear it from Satan's own mouth, right? And not just mine.
If Donald Trump wins, they will move to disqualify him through Congress, invoke civil war conditions, and tell the Trump hordes that Donald Trump is disqualified and not allowed to be president.
So it's going to be up to us on January 6, 2025 to tell the rampaging Trump mobs that he's disqualified. And then we need bodyguards for everybody and civil war conditions, all because the 9 justices, not all of them, but these justices who have not many cases to look at every year, not that much work to do, a huge staff, great protection, simply do not want to do their job and interpret what the great 14th Amendment means. And I'm glad that Sherilyn's creating her new center so we can bring that back to life, even as we're continuing to amend the Constitution, as Professor Hassan has invited us to do.
What a wild thing to say to a group of people so casually, that we will need bodyguards for everyone's civil war conditions. What he is saying that if Donald Trump wins on January 6th, they must stop him from taking office.
Because that's what communism does. It's a communist takeover. That's what I'm trying to say. It's a communist takeover of our country. They're saying, forget the Constitution, forget the rule of law, forget the Supreme Court. We're just going to make up our own rules. He's saying, oh, they're not doing their job. No, it's not for you to say that just because you disagree with their decision. That's why we've got separation of powers. And that's why the judicial branch is separated from the legislative and the executive. That's the whole purpose. But no, these communists don't care about law. Unless it's just forcing it on you. They don't follow it themselves. They don't give a flying crap about the Constitution. And they certainly don't care about freedom in this country. And they certainly don't care who you vote for. They just want to steal power for themselves. That's what it's all about. And if we let them do it, they're going to do it. So they're already prepping for civil war. And what happens then? They bring in the UN military force on their side. That's already pre-planned to attack our own military. Imagine that. Imagine that. And I'm sure we've got generals at the top that are ready to sell us out because they're globalists too and got their little promotions and jobs from the little globalists so long as they back them up when the time comes, right? Yeah. That's how freedom falls to thunderous applause. Star Wars. Yeah, look at Star Wars. George Lucas, when he created Star Wars, was basing things off of Germany and how Hitler and how the nation was taken over from within and became what it became and how freedom lost. And the same thing is happening in the United States right now. If we let it. If we let it. Okay, so I'm gonna go into my story. And then finish up with my man and my brother. How do I start? So first of all, I got to start off by saying that even as I tell you this stuff, take it with a grain of salt. I'm no one special. I'm no special snowflake. I'm not a holy person. I wish I was a holy person. I wish I was a saintly person. I'm striving on a regular basis to become a better person, and I hope to achieve becoming a holy person and hopefully even a saintly person one day. But I'm not there, and God didn't choose me for this, and I don't know why He chose me for this, but He did. And it wasn't because I'm anyone special or anything like that. So I just want to throw that out there just to start with. Um, and I wish I, you know, could follow God a whole lot better than I do or have. Looking back at my own life, especially knowing the things I've known or been exposed to. You know what I mean? But anyway, that aside, so I come from a large Protestant family out of Texas. Um, I'm Scott Irish descent. I'm related to parts of the English nobility. Uh, um, Henry VIII was my great great grandfather by blood, by way of Anne Boleyn's sister, Mary Boleyn, famously known as the other Boleyn girl. Uh, she, if you watch some of the movies and read some of the books, you get an idea. She had an affair with King Henry before Anne Boleyn, who he later married, right? But if you listen to historians, especially in England, they will tell you that Mary Boleyn had a 20-year off and on relationship with King Henry, and they believe he fathered two children, a boy and a girl, and I come from that line. Mary, King Henry VIII took those children in and raised them in his court as pretty much almost as his unofficial children. And they were the last two to be buried with full burial rights in Westminster Abbey. Now, I've been to Westminster Abbey a few times, and I was awarded special favors there for being able to prove my lineage back to that and to the royal family. And in fact, Anne Boleyn's mother is out of the Spencer lineage that Princess Diana is from. So I'm distantly related to her, going back to that. It's the Howard Spencer line. And prior to Anne Boleyn and Mary Boleyn, her lineage of the Howard Spencer line goes back to two former kings of England out of the House of Plantagenet. And that was the first House of England, and it's considered even higher than the House of Tudor that King Henry VIII was from. So I'm possibly blood related to three former kings of England and two of the House of Plantagenet and one of the House of Tudor. But anyway, that's not a major deal. I'm no fan of King Henry VIII, especially what he did to divide the church. The Lord showed me a vision one time. I don't know if I can talk about that as much. The Lord showed me a vision one time of a private conversation of Mother Teresa of Calcutta with Princess Diana. Showed me the whole conversation. They were friends. They were close friends at one point, and before Diana's death. And God showed me the whole conversation as though I was standing right there hearing it. Crazy. And I'll just tell you, since I brought it up, I guess, Princess Diana started crying, and she told Mother Teresa of Calcutta that she was sorry that her family line caused a schism in the Catholic Church and all the repercussions of that played out to this day. And Mother Teresa of Calcutta, who had a gift of prophecy, not many people know, but I know a couple of instances of her given prophecy. She instantly grabbed the hand of Princess Diana and she patted the top of it. And she was trying to console her, but she gave her a prophecy and she says, "Don't worry." She says, "There will be somebody out of your line who will defend the church in its darkest hour." And I got chills all down my arm, and my hair standing up on my arm as I say that. I always take that as a sign of confirmation in the Holy Spirit. If someone tells me a religious story like, "Oh, I had a dream about this. Oh, I felt this word on my heart." If they're telling the truth, I feel it. I feel a confirmation. I get goosebumps all the way up through my neck, down my arms, and if it's real strong, on my whole body. And I just got that just mentioning that that conversation. But anyway, that's jumping ahead. Going back, so I come from a Protestant family, Methodist primarily. And when I was a kid growing up with my family in Texas, everybody in my family that I knew of at the time, and my grandparents all went to church every Sunday. I grew up going to Sunday school and everything else. I always felt very close to God, even as a child. I'm not sure why. Um, I don't know if it was because of my mom, maybe, but she was always close to God, but not like super close. I don't know how to, she always liked God, but I don't know. There was still a distance there. I can't put my finger on. But anyway, I always felt really close to God. My mom took a job in Louisiana at Carville Hospital. James Carville, the liberal turd in Congress. That's where his family's from, Carville. And my mom was in the public health service, and we lived on a military base that was built during the Civil War. And yes, the house I lived in was haunted as hell. But I won't go into that. I'll save that for another time. Haunted houses that I've lived in. Oh man, maybe Halloween. But anyway, so I grew up on that military base, and on that military base, they only had two churches. One was an old Catholic church, and the other was a non-denominational Protestant church. Well, we weren't Catholic. We went around though to a bunch of different faiths at one point. We went to Baptist. We went to all kinds of different churches to just check them out, see if we found anywhere that we felt like we belonged at. And my mom was divorced at this time, so I was a single child living with my mom on the military base. And we wound up going to we settled down at the non-denominational Christian church on the military base with the Reverend Ray McPherson. And I became best friends with his young son that was close to my age, Jonathan McPherson, who went on in the military to be in a military band that like played for the White House and stuff. Amazing. They had an amazing family. Their whole family, very gifted, especially musically, but just a good, holy, solid, beautiful family. And fast forward a few years, my mom ended up getting married. We actually moved off the base into a rural area, and we moved right next door to the Reverend McPherson and his family. And me and his son Jonathan were best friends, living out in this little rural area together. And man, that was a blessed time because we had like the little BMX bikes, like in Stranger Things, and we would go around, stirring up trouble and making up stuff and, trying to keep ourselves occupied. I was very independent as a kid. I would go out in the woods and spend all day just going as far as I could, doing whatever I wanted all the time. And even at night, sometime I'd leave my house and didn't have much in the way of rules in my house. I could pretty much do what I want for the most part. And as a kid, I felt free, man. I had free. And I got into a little bit of, mischievous kid trouble, but nothing like really bad. I was always like a good kid, I did silly stuff like cutting school, playing hooky. Hooky, is that what you call it? Hooky. Not the hickey, that comes later. but I did mischievous stuff, but I was always a good kid. And I was lucky because the most part I had pretty good friends. But my mom ended up getting remarried. She got an annulment from my dad, and she got remarried to a man who was a first generation Catholic from Poland. And I don't know if you know anything about Catholics from Poland. They tend to be very strict Catholics. All right. And this man was also a medical doctor, and he actually was famous virologist, which is why I know a lot about medicine and stuff that most people don't. He was even nominated for a Nobel Prize in medicine because he made a discovery in why malaria relapses in people, and he goes down in history for that. He discovered why malaria relapses in people, and for that he was nominated for a Nobel Prize in medicine. He didn't have a chance of winning the Nobel Prize, but his gift was kind of the nomination. That was like his prize, But anyway, he was a brilliant scientist and doctor. But, and he started school at UCLA. He started medical school at UCLA when he was 13 years old, like Doogie Howser, right? Or Sheldon. And Sheldon is a good example because you notice, you ever watch Big Bang Theory, which I love that show, right? it's good, lighthearted fun, right? But anyway, notice how Sheldon is so brilliant on one hand, but he's kind of like retarded on another. Can I say that? Yes, because I'm part retarded, so it's politically correct. So he he he's a genius on one level, but when it comes to social involvement, he's off, like way off, right? And people are like, how can you be so smart and dumb at the same time? Well, that's how it is. So a lot of times I've come across people that are really gifted in one area, they tend to be really lacking in others. All right. It's a natural thing. My stepfather was like that. He was a brilliant man, but he also socially, he had a hard time socially in social situations a lot of times. He got away with it because people respected him for his being a doctor. Just like Sheldon gets away with it. Like he insults Penny all the time, but she stops a second and then she blows it off because she knows he doesn't know any better. So she doesn't get offended. Well, people would give my stepfather a pass, even though he's acting like an ass because of he's a doctor and respected and da, 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 da. I used to tell God, I was like, Lord, if that's being intelligent, I want to be stupid. I did. I said that, and look, thank God for answered prayers. Well, it's for unanswered prayers, right? So, but my stepfather, I remember I talked about being free as a kid and doing what I want. So when my stepfather came along, this was right in the 7th grade. I was getting ready to start high school. Me and my stepfather clashed like two freight trains. I had a pretty strong personality already. And this guy came on like he's the boss and you got to snap to and do whatever he says, whenever he says, blah, 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 blah. And that didn't go over so well. I've got a very kind of healthy disrespect for authority. And I think there is a healthiness to having a disrespect for authority to a degree. I'm also prior police and military, so I also believe in authority. But I also believe you don't just do something because you're told to. And I also don't believe you just follow the crowd because they're told to. I believe in being an independent thinker and I'm a critical thinker. And I believe that even if the whole world jumps off the bridge, it doesn't mean that you should too. And if I've got to swim upstream or stand against the whole world on a principle I believe in, then the whole rest of the world can kiss my shiny, smooth rear because that's the kind of person I am. Now, when I was growing up, that was called having a spine and a backbone. But today, with the snowflake generation, that's called toxic masculinity. Well, I'll tell you, it's toxic femininity is what it actually is, not toxic masculinity. And I'm not talking about cases of abuse because I'm not for any person abusing other people. Anyway, so me and my stepfather didn't get along real well. He was very strict and authoritative, and that only pushed me away. And he tried to force me to become Catholic because he's a very strict Catholic. And forcing me to do something is really the wrong way to get me to do anything. So I swore to God I would never become Catholic just because my stepfather's an asshole. Now I say that in jest because he could be an asshole, but he also had very good qualities, and he could be a very good person. So I'm not just defaming his name. But we all have good qualities and bad qualities. And I'll tell you what I said at his funeral, and I also said it at my dad's funeral, and I believe it to this day. You love people for the good that they do and the good that they represent that they are. And you forgive them for their weaknesses and the bad that they've done. And you better doggone learn to forgive them. Don't hold grudges. Because the measure with which you forgive is the measure that God will forgive you. So if you want God to forgive you, you doggone better learn to forgive other people. And let me tell you something else about forgiveness. You might think holding a grudge is hurting the other person, and it's possible, but it's going to eat you up inside. By forgiving the other people, what you do is you bring healing in here. You will always get more out of that. You know, that's a little trick to it. So for some people that might struggle with forgiveness, and it's important to be able to forgive ourselves. I find personally the hardest person for me to forgive in my life is me. That's the hardest person I struggle with forgiving. But we have to. We have to. We have to. Anyway, I swore I'd never become Catholic because my stepfather tried to force it on me so much. Well, they pulled me out of public school and they put me in Catholic school, which actually was a really good thing because when I was in public school, I had learning disability of dyslexia. I was in good company because so was Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein was dyslexic and got an F in his first, I think, algebra or math class because of his dyslexia. There's a whole lot of famous people that have had dyslexia. It's just a different, your brain's just wired a little different. I had to study a lot harder in school than most kids had to in order to get by. And I only graduated high school with a 1.7 GPA. Nothing to be proud of. My first stint in college, I had a 2.0, and I left the state police and went to study theology and philosophy, and I ended up with a 2.9, arguably 3.0 in my GPA because I got an A on my thesis, which is an extra credit point, which I don't think they've reflected, but it's the truth. So I'd say 3.0 in my 2.9, 3.0 in my major. Then I went on to grad school, and I ended up getting like a 3.4 to, I mean, I'm sorry, was it 3.4 to 3.6 GPA? All with teachers that said I was too stupid to ever go to college. Yeah, stick that where the sun don't shine. In fact, my teacher, and it's when I went to public school as a kid, they don't have like they had like remedial classes, special education they call it. Yes, I was in the Special Olympics one time. True story. And I whooped them kids' ass. But anyway, in the public schools, you had remedial classes, and you just got labeled as being stupid, and they didn't try to like challenge you or educate you at all. You just sat in a room and goofed off with a bunch of other labeled kids, and you write like cat all day and stuff like that. I mean, it was stupid. So my mom and stepfather pulled me out of the public school and they put me in a Catholic school. The Catholic school didn't have remedial classes. You either sank or you swam. And when I started there, I had a hard time because the other kids were a lot more advanced than I was. And I was coming in late. Another thing about Louisiana is cliques. These kids have been together since kindergarten, and they do not like outsiders joining their group. And my parents were told when I went to the school that a lot of kids don't accept newcomers like me. But I had kind of a cool personality, and once I started playing football and became popular there, then Johnny was in the spot. Everyone loved me in the school, and I'm still best friends with my little clique from that school. And not only that, a whole bunch of us all became state troopers together later. One of them lives just down this road from me, my best friend. Anyway, so they put me in the Catholic school, and one day they showed us a film in our religion class about a place called Medjugorje, Yugoslavia. And in Medjugorje, Yugoslavia, the country Yugoslavia, a town called Medjugorje, they claim that the Blessed Mother, Mary, the mother of Jesus, was appearing and giving messages to little children. And that's going to bring me back to this story when I'm done. So Mary was giving messages to these little children. And I didn't know if it was real or not, but I went home and I got on my knees and I prayed to the Blessed Mother. And I said, listen, I said, if this is real, I said, then send me there. I said, I know you can do it, so get it done. And that was it. That was my prayer. Well, about 2 years later, I'm in high school, and my neighbors were going on a trip to Medjugorje. Well, they needed one more person to go so they could get like the group cheaper rates in order to make the trip. So they asked my parents if I wanted to go. And I was like, yeah. And I went to my room, got on my knees again, and I was like, Mary, I was like, took you long enough, but hey, you came through. So I went on this trip. And turned out the priest that was on the trip was named Father Ken Roberts. He was very famous. He wrote a book called Playboy to Priest, how he had lived as like a, kind of wealthy playboy and ended up having a conversion to the point that he became a priest. And he ended up bringing lots of kids on these trips to Medjugorje. And he became a really kind of famous person in his own right. I spent a lot of time with him. I did 3 more trips with him and spent a lot of time with him. And he was a good, holy man. He's passed away since, unfortunately. But he was a good, holy man. I was very lucky to be with him on that trip. And what kills me is the trip, I mentioned this before, the trip that they went on right before my trip, they brought a 90-pound seminarian that got possessed like by the devil, like, and it took a whole football team to hold the kid down with a knife. And I was like, man, I wanted to be on that trip. Why did I miss that? Come on, it was the one right before mine. But anyway, because mine was not that fun. I don't know if that would have been that fun, but I was like, man, I want to see that. Anyway, but I went on the trip, and the trip changed my life. A few days there, first of all, when I was there, I got sucked into prayer like I've never been in my life. Like I was just like a little monk while I was there. I mean, I just couldn't stop praying. And it was like easy and natural. Now it's not easy or natural. But I mean, it is to some degree, but not like it was then. I was given a gift then. And a couple of days there, they had a bunch of confessionals going on. I mean, they had hundreds of like confessionals. Now, I was not Catholic, so I had not been to confession before. I knew what it was, but I had never done it because I wasn't Catholic. But I decided, hey, maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea if I went to confession. So I waited in this line, and I picked a priest that, had a kind of like, happy look on his face. Not, like, I'm gonna avoid that dude. So, but I get in the line, and it was this Mexican priest, all right, with a thick, Spanish accent. It was a little bit hard to understand him a little bit. But I tell him all my sins, and then he puts his hand on my head, and he says, "My son, what you must do while you are here is go off and find a place of seclusion and ask God to tell you what your destiny is." And I'm like, my what? My destiny? I'm like, come on, man. That's laying it on a little thick. I mean, I know this was my first confession and all, but that doesn't sound right. So I asked him to repeat it, and he did. He's like, "My son, what you must do while you are here is you must go off and find a place of seclusion and ask God for what your destiny is." And I'm like, man, that sounds awfully deep. I mean, that sounds heavy. I was just looking for a little bit. I mean, that sounds like a lifelong commitment kind of thing. I don't know if I'm ready for that. I'm just ready to put my feet in the water kind of thing. I'm not ready to dive in. But anyway, I tried to do what he said, and I went off and I found this really cool spot. And what was neat is I would sit and stare at the stars at night, and they had meteor showers there at this time of year. So I just saw all these meteor showers. Wild. But I spent a couple of days praying, and I did exactly what he said. And you would think like a young, impressionable kid that like all these things would be going through my head, but no, not a single idea popped in my head that whole time. And after about 3 to 4 days, I started getting a little kind of impatient. I'm like, well, I did what I was told. Why am I not getting anything? So I went to the famous priest, Father Ken Roberts, who was on our trip, and I went and spoke to him about it. I told him I went to confession. This is what the priest said. I did what the priest said. Now I'm asking you, which is called spiritual direction. And so he says, I tell you what, he says, I'm giving a talk on the rosary, right, in front of the St. James Cathedral. He says, there's a statue of the Blessed Mother in front of it. And he says, I want you to go there after the talk, and I want you to kneel down. And he says, I want you to ask the Blessed Mother, Mary's Jesus's mom. And he says, I want you to ask her what your destiny is. And he says, and I promise you, she will give you an answer. And I'm like, yeah, well, right now we're talking, you know, none of this, you got to wait and see stuff, you know, I'm ready for the instant gratification. You know, I want it now. And I was thinking, hey, I went to confession. I did what the priest said. Now I went to spiritual direction. I did what the priest said. So God now legally has to give me an answer, whether he wants to or not. I was like, I got him. I got him. So the priest gave a beautiful talk. And after that, I knelt down in front of the statue of the Blessed Mother. And I went through the whole thing. I said, I went to confession. The priest said this. I did this. I went to spiritual direction. The priest said this. I did this. I said, the priest promised me you would give me an answer. So I said, Blessed Mother, you know, Mother of Jesus, what is my destiny going to be? And right then I get a tap on my shoulder. And I'm like, go away. I'm fixing to find out what my destiny is, man. Can't you see that? And then I get another tap on my shoulder. And I'm like, go away. I'm getting ready to find out my destiny. And then I get a third tap on my shoulder. And I'm like, Mary, I was like, look, I'm going to see what this rude person wants. But hold on to that thought because I still want my answer from you. And I turn around and this guy from England who's there on a pilgrimage with his son named John said this. He says, I'm sorry to bother you, but the Blessed Mother told me to come over here and tell you something. And he says, but before I do, I want you to tell me you're not going to think I'm crazy. And I said, in typical Johnny Bell, I'm a ass of a child fashion, I said, look, man, I don't know you, so I can't tell you that I'm not going to think you're crazy. I said, but go ahead and tell me what it is you think you got to tell me anyway. I mean, come on. I was a turd. And the man said that Mary told me to come over here and tell you that you're going to become her priest. And I was like, no way. Not me, man. You got the wrong dude. I was like, first of all, well, I'm not Catholic, so there's a problem. I said, second of all, I said, I like women, so there's another big problem. And he said a second time, he says, you're going to become her priest. And I said, look, all due respect, you're not hearing me. I'm like, when I said I love women, I mean, I love women. I love women. I love all women. I love women. I said, I'm going to get married and I'm going to raise 6 little Pablo Picassos. That's exactly the words I said. I said, I'm going to get married. And I'm going to raise 6 little Pablo Picassos. That's what I said. And he said a third time, you're going to become Mary's priest. All right. And I was just like, that is not the answer that I was looking for. I mean, come on. And then he starts quoting scripture about the rich man getting into heaven. And man, that was like someone took a knife and just jabbed it in and started twisting it. Because I remember a year before that sitting in church and hearing the sermon and the gospel reading about the rich man getting into heaven. And he turned it down. And I thought, you dumbass. God offered you the opportunity to become an apostle. And you turned it down? What? For money? For material crap? I was like, what? I mean, I got angry. I remember that. And I remembered all that at the moment when the guy said this to me. And I never had thought to that single moment that giving up a wife and children to become a priest or religious would be something that you could offer to God as like a sacrifice. You know, I thought, only like physical things, but I didn't realize you could offer that up as a sacrifice. It didn't hit me until that second. Oh, come on, I was a kid. Anyway, so the next day I go to church. The next day was the Feast of the Assumption. It's a major feast day. It's getting ready to come up. And I'll be serving at my church here when it happens here on the feast on the 15th. For the Feast of the Assumption. And at the gospel reading for that Mass that day on that feast, which is a huge, huge Marian feast, It's the day that Mary was died and went to heaven, or was assumed into heaven. Hence the name Assumption, was assumed up to God. Um, the gospel reading was the rich man getting into heaven, or the rich man with Jesus. It was that exact scripture that guy had said to me the day before, that, like, felt like someone stuck a knife in me, kind of thing. So I flew back home from there, and I was like, good thing I had a window seat, right, on the plane, the window seat. I'm staring out the window the whole way like this. Like, I'm just in shock, man. I'm like, I don't know about this priest thing, man. That just don't sound right. I come home and I go meet my bishop, who was a great, great bishop at the time. His name is Bishop Ott. And he was friends with Mother Teresa of Calcutta. I got a picture. If I thought about it, I'd have thrown it up, of my bishop, Bishop Ott, with Mother Teresa of Calcutta. And he actually got Mother Teresa's nuns to come here to Baton Rouge, and they're still here. I've gone and helped them a few times, serve in their soup kitchen and stuff. Anyway, I told the bishop, I said, yeah, I went to Medjugorje. And the bishop says, well, that's great. And I said, no, it was bad. And he goes, oh, okay. And I said, what I say? I said, Mary told me that I was going to become a priest. And he goes, well, that's great. And I said, no, it's bad. And he goes, oh, okay. And he puts his head down. And I said, but I told her I'd meet her halfway and that I'd become a Catholic. And he goes, well, that's great. He was a funny little old man, but kind of like the old grandfather type. You just can't help falling in love with this old person. You know what I'm saying? He's just a loving person, and it just, you could feel that. Anyway, so I asked him, I said, look, how do I become Catholic? And he says, I was already going to Catholic high school. He goes, he says, your class is getting ready to go into confirmation, which is the final step in becoming a Catholic. And he says, just jump in there. He says, I'll sign you in the books. I was like, okay. I didn't go through anything to become a Catholic. Now, that said, though, my stepfather was a solid Catholic and taught me a lot about the Catholic Church and all. And because I asked a lot of questions and stuff, and I knew more and took it more serious than anybody else in my school, junior high or high school. And that I can promise you. So converts tend to know more about the faith because they don't take it for granted, and they've had to study more in order to get where they are. So that's something that you can find a lot amongst converts to the faith, kind of thing. Now, that's how I became Catholic. Now, something interesting happened the night I became Catholic. You go through the ceremony of confirmation, and it's supposed to be a stirring of the gifts of the Holy Spirit that you get at baptism, all right? And there's 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit. Well, that night, I received like knowledge, like bam, and it was just pure gift. A light just went off in my head, and I just understood theology. I just understood it. I all of a sudden knew more theology than my stepfather did. All right, in that one moment, and it was noticeable. Like I could notice that, oh, man, I understand. I know theology now. It was weird. It was just a gift from God, and the knowledge is one of them. And I just had that, and that started me off on part of my journey where I'm sitting right here talking to you. But anyway, that was the start of my journey. Later, I graduated high school and I went to college. And you got to understand something. You ever hear about the Amish kids, and you ever hear about, what do they call that thing? Rumspringer? Rumspringer is where Amish kids get a break from being Amish kids. And they get to go out in the real world. And they have so much time to spend in the real world. And then they got to come to a decision. Am I going to return back to living the Amish life, closed off from the outside world? Or am I going to stay in the world and never speak to my family in the Amish community again? Well, that's what they do on Rumspringer. Some stay, some go back. But what all of them tend to do is party their ass off. And I get it. I get it, because they've been so strict all their whole lives, and not allowed to make a lot of their own decisions, that when you can finally be free and make your own decisions, you don't tend to make the best decisions in the world. Well, that was me. My stepfather was very strict, and it was very hard on me through high school. In fact, that was some of the worst years of my life. I hated it. I mean, it was just like prison sentence for me. I just was miserable. But I knew if I just bit my tongue, and I didn't always do that, but if I just waited my time out, then I could get out and get to college and be free and do whatever I want. And that's what I did. Well, when I got to college for the first time and finally had freedom, I made a lot of stupid decisions and choices because I never had real freedom before, and I never was able to make my own choices. And for all you parents, if you don't teach your children how to make decisions for themselves, they're never going to learn how to make proper decisions for themselves, which means they're going to make all the wrong decisions. Teach your children how to make decisions. Reward them when they make good ones. Let them see the consequences when they make bad ones. But that's something I would absolutely teach in my kids if I had children today, which I do not. But so I joined a fraternity, Lambda Chi Alpha, and I went crazy. And I mean crazy. And we had some crazy times in that frat house, man. And I remember I woke up one morning in the frat house, and like my soul was just depleted. And I woke up. We'd had a party the night before. There was about an inch of caked on beer on the floor, and everyone's passed out everywhere, like zombies just starting to come to life. It was like out of a movie scene, like, you know, from Animal House or some kind of craziness. And I was like, I remember just feeling really empty inside. And I thought to myself, man, there's got to be more to life than just partying, you know? And right then, my old spiritual director, called me and asked me to go on a retreat. And I was like, you know what? That's probably what I need right now more than anything. So I was like, that's a good idea. I'll do that. What he didn't tell me, it was like a vocations retreat to the priesthood, or I wouldn't have gone. They can be sneaky, man. Anyway, I went on this retreat. It was really nice. And I decided at the end of that retreat that if I was going to prove to God that I did not have a vocation to be a priest, that I had to go try to join like a priestly formation thing. So I picked a religious order in Cheshire, Connecticut, called the Legionaries of Christ. And they were like on fire. These guys are like hardcore, like Marines. I mean, to the hilt. Now the Marines would be easy after these guys. In fact, I joined the military after, and it was much easier because of these guys. I mean, they were tough. Now their founder came under some scrutiny, and really put a lot of bad press for their community, and it's sad, but it also was good because their community had a little bit too much in the way of pride, or it's us or nobody kind of thing, and that's not a healthy thing to have in the church. It's everyone should be working for I mean, you all have your own job and charism, but everyone should be working towards the same mission. You're trying to serve the same guy, you know what I mean? The same Lord. So it shouldn't be it's us or nobody. We're all should be working together, you know. Now, are some going to be better than others? Yeah, that's life, but it's not something that you should pride yourself on. You know what I mean? We should always strive for excellence and to be better and to do more. But it shouldn't be a source of pride. And this community did have that. However, I got to say, that's the only negative thing about the community. Other than that, everything I saw was very holy. They had some very holy priests, and they gave very good formation. It was strict, but it was good formation, and a lot of that helped to shape me in a lot of ways, and I really appreciate that, and I appreciate my time there. Well, I left and ended up going back to that same community later. But just to keep the story shorter, I'll tell you, one day I'm in the community and I decided you get very little free time in this community, very little free time. I mean, they got like a schedule on the wall for the day and it tells you when you can go to the bathroom. It tells you like when you can have a break and it tells you when you can talk and when you can't. And I mean, it's just like every detail of the day is on this list. And if it's not on there, it doesn't get, you don't do it. You have to, and you got to follow that list. Oh, it's God's will is that list. You want to do God's will, you got to follow the list, you know. But we had a little bit of free time once, and I decided to go in the chapel and just have some alone time and pray. And I went in the chapel, and man, bam! It's like God, I said, hit me over the head with the Jesus bat. Boom. You know how if you download something on your computer, you can see like the file going and all of a sudden, boom, and it just all pops up like on your screen, you know? That's what happened. Like if you just snapped your fingers, it's like the entire Encyclopedia Britannica just popped in my head. And it was all visions and prophecies about the future. And just to keep it short, I'll just give you a small summation. But it doesn't do it justice because I saw things as though I was there. I experienced things as though I lived it. All right, even though they haven't happened yet. All right, but this is basically in a nutshell what it all said. God says, John, in the very near future. Now, I do have to say this was in 1996, 97. I believe. It's been a long time, but I believe it was around 1996, 1997. So that was quite a ways ago. I was a young man. And God says, John, in the very near future, the United States is going to fall. The United States is going to fall. And he says it will be destroyed and it will never rebuild. There will be survivors that will rebuild, but the country, America, will never rebuild. Never. Not in all of history. America will be gone. It'll be done. All of its beliefs, its idealisms, gone. All of its freedoms and liberties, gone. Constitution, gone. Rights, gone. All of it. And God told me it's going to fall for two reasons. One, he says, it's my will that America is destroyed. My will. I hear Christians all the time that take this fluffy bunny approach with Almighty God saying, oh, John, why are you talking about this fear-mongering stuff to us? Because God would never allow us to experience anything like that. And I'm like, have you read the Bible? I mean, have you read it? I mean, really read it? It's full of stories where God does that constantly. I mean, come on. God said it was his will that the United States is destroyed. His will. And he said, out of all the sins that America, and basically it's because America has turned its back on God. All right. Look at our government right now, and you can't have any argument against that. I'm sorry. Look at the whole pride movement, and you can't have any argument against that. All right. God's destroyed countries over that before alone. Remember Sodom and Gomorrah? That's not a joke. And here's something else. We know of Sodom and Gomorrah one time in the Bible, but that's not the only time God's destroyed countries for that reason. God's destroyed countries 5 times for that one reason. That's the same as Sodom and Gomorrah. And you think the U.S. is any different? No. Now, God said this, though. The reason the U.S. is going to be destroyed, the reason why it's his will, ultimately because we've turned our back on God. Okay? And God then removes his protection over us as a result. Then the devil's free to do what he wants. But God said the number one reason why it's his will for the U.S. to be destroyed forever He says, beyond any other sin that we commit, it's because the sin of abortion. The sin of abortion. God said the sin of abortion has sealed America's fate, and it will be destroyed forever because of the sin of abortion. All right? And I don't care what anyone on planet Earth says or what any Christian claims to be or say. If you don't believe that abortion is wrong, then you're on the wrong side of relationship with God. Period. End of story. Drop the mic. And I'll get off my soapbox. That reminds me something that Mother Teresa of Calcutta once said. Mother Teresa of Calcutta, when she won her Nobel Prize award and gave her speech in front of the little Clintons, mocking her in the front row, those little demons, she said this. She gave a prophecy. Mother Teresa of Calcutta said, the fruit of abortion is nuclear war. The fruit of abortion is nuclear war. That wasn't a small statement. That woman just made a prophecy about the fate of the United States. That saint, that holy woman said, the United States is going to be destroyed because of abortion. And that's the same thing God told me. So I'm in good company. The second reason why God said the United States is going to be destroyed, he says, because of our politicians. He called them Judases. That was his words. He says they are Judases. And he says these Judases are selling you out. They're selling out your country. And he says the reason why they're selling out your country is because they are globalists. And these globalists believe that their goal is to create a one world government. And in order to create that one world government, they must destroy the United States in order to accomplish this. It's the last thing in their way. It's the last bastion of freedom and liberty and independence. So it must be dealt with. These people are not protecting our country. They're Judases. Our politicians are Judases. They're demons, demon possessed. And they are actively seeking to destroy us and our country forever so that they can create their one world government. And they will. They will accomplish this. One way or another, they will accomplish this. God told me, showed me. God also said that when they create their one world government, the head of that one world government shall be the Antichrist that's foretold and prophesied in sacred scripture to come. And he will reveal himself, and God says you will know exactly who he is because he will declare himself the one leader of the entire earth. The one leader of planet Earth in the New World Order, the one world government. The Antichrist. Now, I claim that Antichrist is here now. And he's moving all the chess pieces around so that he can set the stage in order to accomplish his goal. And I claim his goal is he's going to have the superpowers of the US, Russia, and China destroy each other. And then Europe is going to create a new government and that's fresh while everyone else is weakened by war. And they're just going to come in and dominate and take everybody else out. In fact, recently someone was talking about an example from an old James Bond movie where this evil genius was using this example that these two fish were fighting each other, and there was a third fish. The third fish stayed out of the fight. He waited for the two in the fight to weaken each other to the point that they were both wounded. Then the third fish, who's fresh, comes in and destroys them all, and he wins. And that's what the New World Order is doing. That's what the Great Reset is all about. That's what the Great Reset's all about. That's what Build Back Better is all about. Build Back Better is about rebuilding from the ashes, from the destruction of the world. So they destroy the existing system, and then they rebuild their utopian vision of a, AI controlled, antichrist controlled world, but it's not going to be anything nice, pretty, or fun. People are going to wish they were dead than be a part of that crap. I tell you right now. Now, the Lord went on to also say this. He said, there will be a great sign before the rapid rise of the Antichrist to power on the world scene as head of the New World Order. A great sign right before his rapid rise to the scene, before he took power. That sign shall be, there will be a new and great schism that takes place inside the Catholic Church. That's what God told me. There would be a new and great schism inside the Catholic Church. My spiritual director one time put me under obedience to go see Bishop Sam Jacobs, who was a bishop down here, and a very good and holy man. I like him a lot, respect him a lot. I went to see him a few times, and my spiritual director put me under obedience to tell him about my prophecies that God had given me. So I went to him. I did what I was told under obedience. I went to him, and he says, well, tell me one of your prophecies. And I thought for a second, and I told him, I said, there's going to be a new and great schism that takes place inside the Catholic Church that will divide the church in half. And he turned red in the face. Sam Jacobs, Bishop Sam Jacobs, turned red in the face and started screaming at me, yelled at me. And he said that I've been hearing that my whole life. And he says, I can tell you as an insider that will never happen, blah, 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 blah. And just got angry and then didn't want to hear anything else I had to say from that point on. But I'll tell you this. I told him, I said, listen, I did not come here to tell you what you've heard many times. I only came here to tell you what Jesus told me to come here and tell you. I said, now what you do with that information is up to you. I said, I did my job. I did my part, and I did it correctly. And I was right, because there is now a schism that is starting to take place in the Catholic Church, and it all revolves around Francis. Now, it's not just Francis. There was a whole lot of bad bishops and especially cadre in the top of the Catholic Church for a long time. But we've had good and holy popes that have held them at bay. But the same globalists that are stealing elections not only stole the election here in our country, but also have been stealing elections all around the world, including the last Mexican election, Venezuelan election, Brazilian election, France, England, Germany, Poland, all putting communists in those positions. The same people also, WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, released from their own internal documents that they were planning to force out Pope Benedict and replace him with a communist globalist that would push a communist globalist agenda on the Catholic Church. And that is 100% what has taken place. And he's attacking traditional Catholics. He's dividing the church, and he will continue to further divide the church. And this ultimately will lead to schism. I attend the traditional Latin Mass, and it's rumored that he's going to come out with a further document punishing those who attend the Latin Mass by saying that no parishes around the world will be allowed to perform the Latin Mass anymore. And once he does that, I'm out. I will go where the Latin Mass is, and that's where I will stay. I believe what he's doing is wrong, evil, and satanic. And also I believe that's what he is. As a theologian, I am no fan of Francis whatsoever, and I'm vocal about my opinions on that. And God told me it was coming. So I knew. I've known for a long. I've been telling friends and family for 20 years that all the stuff is coming, and stuff that we see taking place right now. All right, stuff that we see taking place right now. Fast forward a little bit. A few years ago, my parents passed away, and they were both in the medical profession. In fact, all my family was in the medical profession, my immediate family. I felt closer to them by going to I signed up to go to EMT school, like to become an ambulance medic kind of thing. I didn't want to work as an ambulance medic. I'd already been a state trooper. That's where I feel comfortable, pulling people over and roughing them up. I'm just kidding. But I felt closer to my parents and wanted to learn more about being a medic. And so I went through the EMT school. Well, I got a short break for a weekend, and I had to bring a camper back to Utah that I had to get worked on, and I had a very limited time to get it done. And I had a business deal I had been waiting on to go through, and it was going to fund my trip, and it pretty much came down to the last minute. Well, last minute the deal fell through, and I lost my money that I'd been planning on to make this trip. So I started freaking out. And I went to church to pray to the Lord. And there's a little church that I go to just down the road. I go to all the time. And I went there, and I went and sat down, and I was upset. I was upset. I was really upset. And I just poured my heart out to the Lord, talking about how upset I was and blah, 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 blah. Well, the minute I walk out of there, money started pouring in left and right from every angle. In fact, my best friend down the road even called me up and said he was going to lend me $2,000. This dude never does that. Like, he can be pretty tight when it comes to money sometimes. Some ways he's not tight at all, but he doesn't lend money out. All right. That's not like in his character. This is the one time I've ever known him he's ever done that. All right. Once. I had so much money coming in from so many directions. I didn't even need the money he gave me. I did my trip, came back, and I gave him the money right back again. Just said thanks, and thank God I could do that. But I was driving on this trip, and the first leg of the trip from Louisiana to Utah, all right, big trip. It was going to take me like 3 days, I believe, and that was hauling. I wanted to make the first leg of the trip to get from Baton Rouge to past Dallas. For those of you that are aware of Dallas, the traffic there is called insanity. All right. I've been in the worst traffic in the United States, from New York to Los Angeles. Los Angeles is pretty doggone bad. But Dallas, and this one spot with the intersection of the interstate is like this. I mean, literally, this is what it looks like. I mean, it's a maze. And if you're not in the right spot at the right time, you miss your exit or connection or whatever. I mean, it's just crazy. I don't know how people deal with that. And it's like 6 lanes of traffic, and you got to merge from one side to the other in traffic and then back to the other. It's crazy. So I'm carrying a camper, and so I'm like, I don't want to go through that. It's hard enough just in a car or truck. I don't want to do that in a camper. So I wanted to drive all night long and get past that part at night when there wasn't a lot of traffic, so I wouldn't have to deal with that in the daytime. Well, I was about 1 hour into my trip, 1 hour, and I was listening to an audio tape by Mother Teresa of Calcutta. I love that woman. I was listening to a story about her life, and because when I do long trips like that, I try to use it as a time to do like a little retreat to pray and that kind of stuff. Since I'm alone and, nothing else to do, might as well use that. And, I'm asking God's help, so I'm not like running into other cars or getting killed. It's dangerous out there. So now here's the craziness. About 1 hour into that trip, give or take, it could have been 2 hours, but it is about an hour or so into that trip, maybe 2. And that first trip is at least 9 hours, And I'm about 1 to 2 hours into it. All of a sudden, Jesus just started speaking to me. Now, the boy I'm going to be talking about, Jesus spoke to him. But when Jesus spoke to this boy, he saw him physically. Like you can see this book, like you can see me. That's called an apparition. If Jesus or Mary or an angel appears to you and starts talking, that's called an apparition. If you can't see them, but you can hear them, That's called a interlocution, an interlocution. What happened to me as I was driving down the road is I received an interlocution, and Jesus spoke to me the same way we're speaking right now, the way you're hearing me. Now, it wasn't an audible voice I heard, but it was a very powerful and strong voice that I heard in here. Just as strong, if not stronger, than me speaking right now. It was very clear, very strong. And it's not like, look, there's many times in my life I felt like I've received like a word from the Lord on my heart or even a message. This is not that. This is something on a whole nother level. All right. And there's no like denying what I heard or, you know, hearing these words when Jesus spoke. It's partly undescribable, but it's, you know, it when it happens. I mean, and it's not like anything else. And there's been many times in my life I've felt a word or felt even a sentence or even I felt like my guardian angel speaking to me, and it was nothing like that. I mean, nothing like that. And when Jesus spoke to me, he said, "John, you wounded my sacred heart." He says, "John, you wounded my sacred heart. You wounded my sacred heart." And man, I just started bawling. Hearing Jesus say that to me, I just started bawling. And I'm trying to think to myself, what did I do that upset the Lord so much? I'm trying to think back to my last confession. Did I do something really bad? What was it? You know, I got to make sure I don't do that again. You know, this is what was going through my head. And I said, "Lord," I said, "what did I do that wounded your sacred heart?" And he says, "Do you remember when you went in that chapel to pray before this trip?" And I said, "Yes." He says, "You sat in that chair, in that pew." He says, "And you poured your heart out." And I said, "Yes." And he says, "You were full of worry. You were full of anxiety, and you were full of fear." He says, "You know what you did not have any of?" He said, "You had no faith." He said, "You had no hope." He said, "You had no trust in me." And I was like, wow, that's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. He said, "You had no faith, you had no hope, and you had no trust in me." He says, "John, that can never happen again. John, that can never happen again. That can never happen again." Said it 3 times. I don't know why. Well, I kind of guess I do know why. Jesus oftentimes when he speaks will repeat himself 3 times. Sometimes 2 times, sometimes 3 times. Often 3 times. And the reason why I learned this in theology school from Dr. Scott Hahn, you know, in the English language, we have good, better, and best, right? Well, it's called a Hebrew idiom. In Hebrew, they don't have good, better, and best. To say good, better, and best, they repeat it. So once can be good, twice is better, and 3 is best. So to really emphasize a point, it's repeated 3 times. Jesus does that, being that he, you know, grew up speaking Hebrew and Aramaic, a dialect of Hebrew. That would make total sense. Well, that's how he talks. Anyway, you see, the important point here is, remember in the stories in the Bible where Jesus said that he could not perform a miracle in a town because they had no faith? If we don't have trust and faith in Jesus, we literally block him. We put up a wall and we block God from being able to act, because God will not go against his gift of free will. He will not. He will not force you. The devil will force you all day and night. Just ask the people in the coming prison camps. God will not force you. He will not force you to love him or to serve him. He will not force you. So when you do not have faith, when you do not have hope, when you do not trust in him, you put up a wall and block God from being free and able to help you. That's why it's so bad. If you want God's help, you have to trust and believe in God. When everything seems dark and hopeless, you have to have faith in God. You have to have hope in God. You have to have trust in God. Just as a child trusts in their parent, you've got to know God's got your back and God's going to be there to help you. If you keep faith, hope, and trust, God will always, always, always be at your side and will always, always, always help you when you need it. Always. That's the key. And that's what Jesus was trying to teach me. And then Jesus said this. He says, John, he says, it's important you learn this lesson because in the near future, I'm going to send you on a public ministry. And in this public ministry, you're going to speak my words and my truth to my people. And I said, okay. And he says, I'm sending you on a mission that you're not going to know. He says, your right foot won't know where your left foot strikes the ground. That's the words he said. He said, you're going to have to learn to trust in divine providence for everything that you need. He says, so much so that for now on, I want you to thank me for having already answered your prayer before I even have. That's how much trust I want you to have in me. He says, I want you from this point on, when you ask me for something, I want you to start thanking me for having already accomplished it before I even have. That's the kind of trust I expect out of you. And that reminded me about a story of Father Solanus Casey, whose cause is up for canonization. He was a saintly person out of Detroit, and I knew people that knew him. And he was a very holy man, full of miracles. And he was connected to Cole Younger of the Jesse James gang. Jesse James back in the day, and his cousin Cole Younger, and the both of them fought over who was the leader of the Jesse James gang. Well, it was called the James Cole. It's called what was it? The Cole. It's called the Younger James gang back then. And they fought. Oh, they got in fist fights over who was the head of the gang. Well, at one point, Jesse James quit the gang, and Cole Younger kept going on. He ended up getting arrested by the Pinkertons and put in federal prison. Well, he had a prison guard assigned to take care of him. And who was the prison guard? It was the person who later became Father Solanus Casey. And he was so impressed with the faith of this prison guard that when Cole Younger got out of prison, he went around talking about how he was saved and how he started loving God as a Christian. And he would give talks about how God saved his soul. And he all talked about that prison guard that converted him in prison. So much so that there's a picture of Father Solanus Casey leaving the prison, dragging a chest behind him. It was a family chest from Cole Younger. How cool is that? I got some other neat little stories like that, but I'm running low on time. So anyway, so God said you got to have this trust. Now then God said this. Jesus said this. He says, John, I'm going to warn you. I'm going to warn you. I'm sending you on a mission of failure. You are going to fail. Remember, he said, I'm going to send you on a public mission. Now he's telling me I'm going to fail that mission. He says, it's going to be a mission of failure. And I was like, well, that don't sound good. And Jesus says, because he says the world is going to reject you and what you have to say. The world's going to reject you and what you have to say. He says, but that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. Jesus says, you tell the world and the people what I tell you to tell them, regardless of whether they accept it or not. Because on their judgment day, they will be judged, and they will not be able to say to me that I did not warn them first. That's what he told me. Then he said this, and this part's really important because it connects back. Jesus said, John, remember two things. Number one, if the whole world rejects you, I will always be there, and I will always be by your side. Always. I will always be there. I will always be by your side. I will always be there to help you. Number one. Number two, Jesus says, if the world rejects you, always remember that the world rejected me first. The world rejected me first. That's what Jesus said to me. And then I asked Jesus, I said, is Francis true? Because I really been struggling if Francis was a good person or not. I had been praying and fasting over it for a couple of years by that point. And this was the answer Jesus gave me. He said, the time of the Antichrist is now, not the future. It's right here, right now. And I asked that question then. And then he responded the same thing, saying a second time, the time of the Antichrist is right now. And that was it. End of transmission. Hung up. And that was it. But here's something crazy. I was only about an hour or 2 hours into this trip for a 9-hour trip. And it seemed like I talked to the Lord maybe 30 minutes to an hour. It was kind of quick, but I was so into it. By the time he and I stopped talking, I drove right into Dallas. This was a 9-hour trip. It started like an hour, maybe 2 hours into it. I talked to him for like 30 minutes to almost an hour. And now I'm in Dallas. So I have like 6 or 7 hours of missing time. Somehow I'd already arrived at my destination of like 6 or 7 hours away. I mean, that was crazy. But it happened. I don't know how it happened, but it happened. So I told you about, now there are other visions and prophecies the Lord gave me. I'm not going into every one of them. I was just hitting some of the highlight stuff. One other one I'll tell you is I was living in Italy where I was studying for a master's degree in theology. It was actually called a licentiate, which is above a master's degree. It's below a PhD, but it's above a master's degree. I was trying to go to the Vatican every week that I was there, but I started seeing a lot of visions and prophecies when I was in Italy, in Rome. I had to stop going to the Vatican because I kept seeing blood and human sacrifices everywhere I looked. And it got to the point it really turned my stomach. And what happens in the future there, the devil takes over the Vatican and he sets up a false idol, and the false idol demands human sacrifice. So they turn the Vatican into a pagan temple, and they start offering up Christians and human sacrifice in this temple. And I saw so many of them. I saw blood everywhere, and it turned my stomach to the point to where, and it happened every time I went to the Vatican. So eventually I stopped going to the Vatican, which is really a shame because it's a breathtaking allness to step in there and see this. And I was trying to take it all in and absorb it so that I'd have it with me for the rest of my life. And I had to stop going because I just saw this human sacrifice everywhere. Also in my apartment, one day I was washing dishes The next day, the next moment, I'm washing dishes at 1 second. Next moment, I'm on the floor in a fetal position, wailing. When a lot of times when I would have these visions, I would have what's like I would travail. I don't know if you know what that word is. It's like a spiritual anguish. It's nothing I can create on my own. I can't force that feeling or that or travail. It's a spiritual pain, and I saw these visions, especially of Americans being forced in America into concentration camps against their will, and it brought me great pain to see this. Now, God also gave me prophecies about the coming of Elijah, the great prophet. And I won't get into that here. One, because I'm running really short on time, but two, because um, that's kind of a different direction, different story. It's a thing of itself. And I don't know if I'm allowed to share a lot of that information yet. But I'll tell you this: God, just as the Antichrist comes to power very soon, so is Elijah. His mission lasts as long as the Antichrist, save 1 month. And Elijah, the Lord showed me, is going to be led to the resting place of the Ark of the Covenant. And Elijah's going to have a showdown with all the forces of the world, all the satanic forces. And just like Elijah did in the Old Testament in the book of Kings 1 and 2, Elijah is going to reveal the Ark of the Covenant, the actual Moses Ark of the Covenant. He's going to reveal it to the world in Jerusalem. Everything's going to center around Jerusalem. The war is not going to start with China or Russia. It's going to start with the Middle East, with Israel, with Jerusalem, as it already has. It's going to get worse. It's going to spiral out of control until it becomes a world war. They're going to rebuild the third temple on the Temple Mount, which is what all this was about. And the Antichrist is going to take his seat as the head of the world in the third temple in Jerusalem, while the false prophet, I claim, takes his seat, which he already has, at the Vatican in Rome. And they rule from those two positions, the Antichrist and the false prophet. All right. Along with the third one, which is the all-seeing eye, the AI chip, the mark of the beast that connects you to AI. It's the all-seeing eye, all right, of AI. And the Antichrist will be connected to that. So he knows everything that's going on in the world by every person who has that mark. And like I said, it's total slavery. And I've described that before, and I'll describe it further in the future. Do you see how all of this that we've spoken of tonight ties together? Even all the films I showed you, how it all ties together with what I'm saying. How other things I show, it all ties together. All of this ties together. We're getting ready to go into a war that will destroy the U.S. The Antichrist will be seen as the peacemaker that ends the war and brings peace, a false peace. He will be the head of the one world government. He will force the mark of the beast. No Christian can survive because no Christian can accept the mark of the beast. Do not accept the mark of the beast. Do not. Do not accept the mark of the beast. It will be technology that connects the human brain directly to AI. You won't need a cell phone. You won't need a computer. All right. I brought that up again on my last show. Let me see if I can find that here. Look at this. Tech giant CEO tells Davos meeting cell phones will be built directly into the body. All right. That's the mark of the beast. You won't need a cell phone. You will have AI speaking directly to your brain, and it's going to monitor everything you do. It's going to monitor what you think. It's going to give you orders. And if you don't follow those orders, you will be punished. And if you don't follow them enough, your chip gets deactivated. You go to a concentration camp, forced labor concentration camp, which you will never leave. And let me tell you, the horrors that are going to go on in those places are unspeakable. Unspeakable. You hear me? So it's bad, right? All right. I think that pretty much covers most of my material. There's still other prophecy. I even told you a prophecy about Princess Diana. Um, there's some other stuff. There's some stuff I can't talk about that God showed me. I talked about a lot of it, and I've tried to hint to a lot of the rest. I think you have enough to kind of go on if you listen to the things I've said. I will say this. I just said no Christian can survive in any modern city on the planet once the mark of the beast comes, because they're going to control all the cities of the world and all the modern places. So how do we live then? Well, the Bible says when you see these things coming, flee to the mountains. That's not a small thing. Flee to the mountains, flee to the mountains, flee to the mountains. The Bible also says when you see these things, come out of these cities, lest you take part in her sins, lest you take part in her punishment. That, I claim, in part, is talking about the mark of the beast. Come out of the cities before you take the mark, because if you take the mark, you will take the punishment that goes with the mark. And let me tell you something. You know, I got in an argument with a friend of mine this morning, when I woke up. A good friend of mine, a good person. I like him a lot. He seemed to think, he's like, John, stop spending all your time on all this doom and gloom crap, man. You should be enjoying your life and the time you have and what money you've got, and go spend it in, having a good time, enjoying life. And I'm like, man, I told him, you've lost track of what the point of this life is, my brother. This life is not about having a good life. This life isn't about having good things and having a good time. This life isn't about having the perfect job, the perfect house, the white picket fence, and the fancy car. This life is about one thing and one thing only, and that's doing whatever it takes to get into heaven. In fact, I sent out a response later that I came across from that book, and let me see if I can find that real quickly, because I really liked it. It puts everything I just said into perspective. Here it is. You ready? This is from Jesus. Life on this earth lasts only for a moment. Life on this earth lasts only for a moment, but life in heaven is eternal. Life in heaven is eternal. Life on this earth only lasts for a moment. Life in heaven is eternal. Is eternal. All right? It's eternal. That's huge. That is huge. You know what? I think I'm going to hold off on the book, because I'm already coming to 2 hours and 40 minutes, and I don't think there's time to do justice to the book. Plus, the book's so important, it probably deserves its own show, honestly. So I'll do that. I'll just wrap up here, and I'll save this, because I want to read. I've got some pages I've got marked out to read to you guys from the book. I want to do it justice, because this is a very important book and a very important story to me. And this is my brother, Sagatasha. I love this kid. I mean, I love this kid. He is my brother. He is my flesh and blood brother, because he's my brother in the spirit. And that which is spirit's greater than that which is flesh. Something else you're going to learn when you get to heaven. When God says love your neighbor, that's because we are all family. We are all family. When you get to heaven, you're going to find that all the children in heaven are your brothers and sisters, more so than flesh and blood, because you're united in the spirit of God. And that makes us all kin. We're all God's children. Doesn't matter your color, doesn't matter your religion. We're all God's children. Now, I say it doesn't matter religion. I do believe some religions are more important, better than others. Honestly, I believe Christianity is the true religion of God. And furthermore, I do believe Catholicism is the highest form of Christianity. It was the first. Now, my show is not about arguing theology, and I certainly don't want to put down anyone that's of different faiths. I realize most of the people on here are not Catholics. But I will say this: Jesus came to planet Earth and created one church, and that was the Catholic Church. And it's it's what he created from the day he created it in an unbroken line. Remember, Jesus had the 12 apostles, and I hate to break this to my Protestant brothers and sisters, but Paul, that he loved to read so much, he was a Catholic bishop. He was a Catholic bishop. They always seem to forget that. And they chose more bishops and more bishops, and we have an unbroken line of bishops from the original 12 apostles, the original 12 all the way to this day. Now, that line of popes has just been broken with Francis, I claim, because I do not believe for the love of God that man is actually a pope. I believe he stole the office. I believe they forced with the globalists Benedict out. There's proof and evidence of this. And I believe they stole the throne. And you can't be a communist and a Christian. It does not work. I have a degree in philosophy. That doesn't work. 5 previous popes have said you can't be a communist and a Christian. And yet Francis calls himself a communist socialist. I believe he is a communist socialist. Everything he says is communist socialism. But it's not Christian. It's not Catholic. In fact, he attacks Catholics for being Catholic. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's crazy. But I also believe, and I'm in an argument with a priest friend of mine right now. When you get to heaven, God's never going to say in your judgment, what religion were you? Were you Catholic? No, he's not going to say that. He's going to say, what did you do with the time I gave you? He's going to say, what did you do with the people I put in your life? What did you do with the talents and gifts that I gave you? What did you do with the time? When I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was thirsty, did you give me drink? When I was in prison, did you come visit me? When I was naked, did you clothe me? Ooh, got the chills. That's what God's going to ask you when you get to heaven. That's what God's going to ask when you are at your judgment. Salvation comes from the church that God created, which is the Catholic Church. However, all grace from that in the cross go to the salvation of all souls who love Jesus. Read the Bible. I got several. This is my academic Bible, the RSV Standard Version. It's got strengths and weaknesses. I found all Bibles, especially I've got several different Bibles, because some are better in some areas, some are better than others. All have mistakes in them. Not mistakes from God, mistakes from the publishers and authors. They all take and they all have to a degree, because in order for them to be able to publish a work, it can't be the exact same as another. So they make changes based on that. Sometimes those changes can change theological meanings, and other times not. But that's for a theology class. Just throwing that out there. If you want to know Jesus, read the Bible. All right. If you want to know Jesus, read the Bible. Look at this. Look at that. Look at that. Read me. That's not a car. It's a Bible. Jesus is king, not just here, but of all the universe, of all the universes. That should be plural. Of all creation, he is the king. Read the Bible to know who he is. Let me tell you something about Mother Teresa of Calcutta. Mother Teresa of Calcutta said this. I use a hand as an example. Silence cultivates prayer. Prayer cultivates faith. All right. Faith cultivates love. Love cultivates action. Got that? Silence cultivates prayer. Prayer cultivates faith. Faith cultivates love. Love always compels us to act. In fact, she says a short version of that of love compels us to service. Love compels us to action. Love compels us to serve. And what she's saying is there's a natural progression. The more we pray, the more our faith is strengthened. The more our faith is strengthened, the more we love God. The more we love God, the more we want to serve God and each other. That's how it works. It's a very simple formula. Very simple formula. But God is not complicated. We are complicated. God is simple. Philosophy, God is simple. God is not complication. We are complicated. God is not. God is simple. That's why when Jesus speaks, he speaks very plainly. He speaks very simply and very straightforward. It's not like some of these bishops. You ask them a question, they give you every 50-cent word in the dictionary. They go around the world 10 times, and still you're more confused at the end of their doggone answer than you were before you asked the question. I call that being forked tongue, which is a sign of being a Satanist, being demonic. That's not how Jesus talks. If you ask a yes or no question, he'll tell you yes or no. I mean, it can't get, is this wrong? Yes. Is this wrong? No. I mean, it doesn't take all that other nonsense, but you see them doing crap like that all the time. Simple. God is simple. Anyway, 2 hours, 52 minutes. I need to try to keep my lives down to 2 hours, but that magic moment for me seems to be around 3 hours. A lot of people like shorter stuff. A lot of people like longer stuff. I get comments several ways. So, in this new world today, everything is, give it to me. And, I got friends that are like, man, if you can't say it in 5 minutes, you can't say it. And I'm like, I can't say hello in 5 minutes. What the hell? That's an impossibility. Anyway, I'll end with this. Again, there's a lot of darkness in our world today. We are not called to be ruled by fear, worry, and anxiety. We are called to be ruled by faith, hope, and trust in Jesus. If you have faith, hope, and trust in Jesus, he will always be there to help you when you need it the most. And you have to know it. You have to know it. It's like in the movies where they hold up the crucifix in front of the vampire and they're like, oh, you got to have faith. It's like that. You got to have faith. You got to know that God's going to help you. And you know what? You get to that point and you will be able to walk on water as long as you stay fixed on Christ. The minute you realize you're walking on the water and you lose your focus, you're going to sink. Refix your eyes on Jesus. Let him be your focus. And a last plea, we have little time left in this world. Little time before things are going to become so bad it turns into a horror show. But don't fixate on that. Fixate on the time that you have with God, with your family, and make the most of it. Make the most of it. And if you can make reasonable preparations for beans, bullets, and band-aids, do it. Do it. If you can get to rural areas, do it. Get out of the cities. When you see these times, flee to the mountains. Flee to the mountains. Flee to the mountains. These are not small words. All right. Anyway, look, next time I will talk about the book, which is phenomenal. It starts off with a very beautiful story I'm going to try and get across. And I'll cover probably some more new stuff that I'm sure will roll around by then. But anyway, thanks for joining. Tonight was a little different of a show. I don't like making me the focal point of the show, but a lot of people have been asking me to share this stuff. And I felt like it was due to that, and especially with the things going on in the world right now, I think it's worth talking about some of this stuff. Oh, and also part of the reason I'm doing this is because it is in preparation for a show I'm planning to do on the identity of the Antichrist. All right, I did that on my last channel, and And this is kind of setting up towards that. Now that I've told you about prophecy and the coming of the Antichrist, and that's where we're on the precipice of right now, I will work that into then going into the identity of who the Antichrist is, all right, where he comes from. Give you a little background and understanding on who that joker is, all right. Maybe I'll expound on Elijah a little bit, although I can't talk a lot about that right now. It's one thing I'm not allowed to talk about too much. I can't. There's some some things I can't. The Lord told me I can't say publicly on that. I can tell people one to one more, but I'm not allowed to put out some public. God's a very big stickler about things have times, and you can't do things until appointed times. So, and it's not for me to argue with him on what that is. I'm just going to go with whatever I believe he says. So, but I tell a little bit about it because I'll tease it, and it's important. And I think we need to put it in the psyche of people so they know. Look for Elijah the great prophet. Look for Elijah the great prophet. Look for Elijah the great prophet. He will be like John. He will be like one calling in the wilderness, make straight the path of the Lord, the weed blowing in the wind. All right. And they talk about the coming of Enoch and Elijah. I claim that's not actually what the scripture says. It says there would be two separate Elijahs, and there were. One was John the Baptist, which Jesus said was Elijah, and there's another coming Elijah, and that's in Malachi chapter 4, where he talks about the coming of the two Elijahs. Now, does that mean he can't still come with an Enoch figure? Hey, I'm all for it. It's quite possible. That's certainly something in the minds of people. It doesn't mean that it's going to be Enoch and Elijah. It could be. I'm not against that at all. I'm just pointing out that a lot of times people take that when really it means two separate Elijahs. And I'm just trying to point that out. John the Baptist was one Elijah, and Jesus said so. And there's still an Elijah to come, and Malachi 4 explains that, at least in some degree. Anyway, look, God bless all y'all. Please keep me in your prayers. Some of my friends have been getting on me for not saying at the beginning, middle, and end of the show that, I need people to like and subscribe and all that kind of stuff that hear the show. I really need to say that more often. And I get so focused on trying to keep up with all the material, I never do that. But I need to do that. They're shadow banning the site. Every time I get new members, they take new members away. And they don't like a lot of the stuff I'm saying, which you can tell for obvious reasons. So pray for me and the show, and pray for each other, and keep the lights on, everybody. God bless y'all.